Report out on our closed session. Nothing to report on the first three items, but on the last item, we unanimously, each council member voted unanimously for the passage of the resolution approving the application for Police Sergeant James O'Callahan for industrial disability retirement. And so I want to thank him for his service, and we hope to see him in the future. Thank you. And so with that, we will do the Pledge of Allegiance. So, Michelle, would you like to call roll call?
Sure. Councilmember Weinsoff? Here. Councilmember Reed? Here. Councilmember Goddard? Here. Councilmember Lax? Here. Mayor Kohler?
Here. Thank you. And I want to get a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Okay, I'll just read the meeting protocol before we get started. The mayor shall maintain order at the meetings in accordance with Robert's Rules of Order, and the council has a responsibility to be a model of respectful behavior in order to encourage community participation and citizen input at council meetings. The council and the audience are expected to refrain from using profane language and or ridiculing the character or motives of council members, staff, or members of the public, and to maintain the standards of tolerance and civility. Please turn off your cell phones or place them in the silent mode. And we'll try to review the agenda at 10 o'clock to ascertain which items we can move over. So with that, I want to move on to our first item, the oath of office, and I'll turn it over to Chief Morin. Thank you, and thanks to his mom and her wife and the rest of the family for coming. So we're very happy to have you join the force. Thank you. Okay, well, with that, we'll move on to announcements. The Brewfest, co-sponsored by Park, will be Saturday, March 14th from 1 to 5 at the Pavilion. Also, the Fairfax Open Space Committee is doing their annual broom pull at Jolly Hill, which is kind of behind Bennett House. It'll be Saturday, March 28th, sometime morning to early afternoon. We'll get more information out on that. The annual Fairfax Open Space Benefit Concert will be held in Perry Park again. It'll be Saturday, May 9th, and it'll be sometime mid-afternoon. And the Fairfax Food Pantry is every Saturday, 9 to 1, Fairfax Community Church, 2398 Sir Francis Drake Boulevard, and they always need volunteers. It's a great place. If any of your friends or family need food, please send them to the food pantry. A couple of other announcements. The Community Emergency Response Team Training, or CERT training, will be held March 14th and 15th at the College of Marin from 8:30 to 5 p.m. each day. It's $45 for the two-day training, and they do have scholarships available. It's important for community members to become trained to help you, your family, and your neighbors in a disaster. You can register at readymarin.org, and to learn more, you can check out their website. Michelle has gotten posted on our website the flyer for the training and also a link to readymarin.org. And also Cindy Swift, who's often here, but I don't see her here tonight, is going to be taking another CERT training. She's already CERT trained, so some people that are CERT trained need refresher. And she's also going to be working with readymarin.org to figure out who all is CERT trained in Fairfax, because we're going to be having a disaster council meeting soon. So check that out, and hopefully many of you will be interested. The other thing I wanted to let you know is I've spoken about Sky Ranch, and the purchase was completed by the Marin Open Space Trust on the 15th of February. And we will begin funding efforts for restoration. It won't be as much as the purchase price, but we will need to do some restoration up there. It's a beautiful piece of property, and I was up there yesterday for a few hours looking at what had been done to date. It's going to be a really wonderful piece of open space for our town in Fairfax. So with that, anybody else have announcements? Okay, so now we will move on. Oh, I forgot, more announcements on the second page. We now have 3 vacancies on the Planning Commission, 1 on the Parks and Rec Committee, 1 on the Open Space Committee, and 1 on the Volunteer Board. And applications are available at Town Hall or also on the town website. So I'm going to open it up to public expression, and it's 3-minute time limit per person. And just want to also remind you that you have 3 minutes to speak, and these are for items that are not on the agenda. So with that, anybody want to speak in public expression? And if you could state your name if you feel comfortable doing so.
Yes, my name is Elizabeth Baker. I live on Acacia Road, and I am currently the president of Sustainable Fairfax. And I'd like to introduce a new program in town. It's the Community Seed Exchange. It's a free seed library program that supports our community with pesticide-free and non-GMO seeds. It's located in the Fairfax Library, and this was in partnership with Sustainable Fairfax, the Fairfax Library, and the Branson Environmental Action Network. So we believe it's important to preserve agricultural biodiversity and have viable seed stock in our town, as well as having people enjoy the pleasures of growing food and flowers and herbs. It is free. Anyone can come and borrow and donate seeds. So it is open during library hours. And if anyone else is interested in learning more about seeds, there's going to be a lecture on Tuesday, March 10th at the library on the art of seed saving. So come check it out.
What time?
What time?
What time?
What time?
7 o'clock
At night.
at night.
Okay, great. Thank you. Anybody else want to speak during public expression for items not on the agenda? Thank you. If you could state your name if you feel comfortable doing so.
Yes, my name is Steve Franks. I have been before the council approximately 2 years ago. What my issue is having a local business that had opened in our neighborhood following permits that were given to them. This has been going on now, noise complaints for 3 years. David asked me 2 years ago, how long is my neighbor going to have to suffer through this? It's been 3 years, and currently, as of February 20th, the local business has not followed through with the promise. Number one, keeping the noise down at 5 o'clock in the morning. Number two was the amount of trucks coming into that parking lot to deliver, and Jim can fill us in a little bit on the permit. And number three was the time of those deliveries, which is set on a permit. As of February 20th, all three of these have not been followed through. This went to the council. They voted it through to the planning commission. There were certain stipulations that were supposed to be followed by the business. 3 years later, they are still not following this. I am frustrated beyond belief. I would like to put the question to the council, is anything going to be done about this? Is it possible for 5 smart people to figure out what can be done? I came up with several very fair comments on putting a chain across a parking lot, and so far this has not been followed through with. A lot of different things. That wasn't their rule that they had to follow through with that, but there was an acoustic sound that was supposed to be put up on the fence and some audio put into their video so that this could be proven. The police have been down there, done a report on February 20th. I do not want to keep on calling our police department and having them come down at 4:30 in the morning. I don't feel that I should have to wake up and follow through with these reports and come back over here year after year and follow through with this. I think something should be done. That's what I have to say. Thank you.
Mayor, can I ask that next month that the manager get back to us not only with a report, either verifying Mr. Frank's statements and perhaps including a staff report from the chief from the record and what Jim knows as well, and not just a report to council, but to review the use permit and see what has to be done to end this problem, because as much as I enjoy seeing my neighbor schlep up over here on a every once in a while basis, I'm tired of seeing my neighbor having to schlep over here on a every once in a while basis. Can we do that, Mayor?
Looking at Garrett, so yes. Garrett, can we follow through on that for the April agenda? Thank you, Mr. Franks, for coming. And so we will have a full report and also a discussion of the use permit and what that entails. And David, did you want to actually revisit the use permit or just have a discussion of the use permit?
Oh, no, it would be over, I think, our pay grade at this point to do that. I think what would be most appropriate would be for the manager to report. But again, Garrett, not just verifying or collaborating or disputing what we've heard here tonight, but also you're going to have to drill down into the use permit. It has requirements, and which ones are being followed, which ones are not being followed, and without making this more contentious than it has to be, how can we, again, bring the parties together so that we can resolve this in the Fairfax way?
Thank you, David. So, Garrett, you'll follow through? Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Frank.
I thank you all for your time and your professionalism.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Mark.
Mark Bell, 63 Domingo. Just two things.
Was there ever any resolution on the noise ordinance regarding Deer Park Villa and the other places? I may have missed a meeting. And then the second would be, what's happening with the horses from Sky Ranch, and are there still plans to bring them back if they are gone?
So where we are on Deer Park Villa is there was a group that came in that was a mediation group that offered to mediate between the neighbors and Mike on the noise problem at Deer Park Villa. They asked us to keep continuing the matter and that they had been talking. Additionally, in the interim, Deer Park Villa has closed down at least temporarily except for private events. So Garrett, do you have anything additional to report on Deer Park? Right now we're still waiting to hear if they want to bring it back.
Yeah, last we heard they were in mediation and we're going to let us know if they want to bring it back. And so we're double checking to see if they want us to bring it back in April.
Okay. So, and then as far as Sky Ranch is, the horses were removed, but they could come back if the Horse Council and others come back with a plan that's sustainable, that includes, there's quite a bit of work that needs to be done out there. And so there's a meeting, I think, tomorrow with the Horse Council, the county, most, to talk more about that plan. The deadline has come and gone many times, and so they're hopeful that they will have a plan with the financial wherewithal. But having been there yesterday, it's a very expensive proposition. The sheds that are there are really not safe, so there would have to be completely new sheds, complete stabilization of the soil. It's very uneven, looks very unsafe for horses. So stay tuned.
Okay.
But, you know, I wrote a letter asking them to make every effort to allow the horses to come back, provided there was a plan for the future that would provide for the safety of the horses and a sustainable plan with the financial wherewithal to keep it going.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks. Okay. Other members of the public?
My name is Helen Strodel. I live just on the other side of the hill from the Wall property. And I understand it's been bought. I know it's one house per 10 acres, but there are all kinds of issues with the site, given that it's a hilly site. I'm very concerned about the development on the Wall property, staying in some sort of conformity with the rest of Fairfax. Huge houses. I'm just really interested in keeping it to as much of a minimum as it can be kept.
Okay, thank you. And as far as I know, we have no application in yet. Right. So any application that would come in would go through the Planning Commission. Sorry, Jim.
Let me back up. We had the applications for certificates of compliance on the first round for 4 lots, and then we responded to that, giving what's called conditional certificate of compliance, basically saying that these lots, to our knowledge, were not created legally. And then we had another 6 applications for certificates of compliance on little odd pieces that they consider lots, and we're not done with our analysis on that. But outside, for actual development or entitlements for homes, nothing yet.
Can I just request, and I know this is public comment, so we're not taking any action or trying to discuss how we're going to figure things out here, but when we talk about things like certificates of compliance, I think it's really important that we start from the beginning. So a word like that doesn't, I don't think, really speak to most people. So so that we have clarity, could you just define that before we move on?
So perhaps we did hear some rumblings or some concerns by the neighbors in the Marinda Oaks. So maybe to step back. So the Wall property, although it's not owned by them anymore, but it's known as that, it's about 99 acres. It's around the Marinda Oaks area, and it's currently zoned, as you said, upland residential, which is 1 unit for every 10 acres. That's what the zoning is, and zoning is a land use type designation, and it indicates how much a property owner can actually develop the property. So he has the rights to develop the property to 1 unit for every 10 acres, assuming it can meet all the conditions of approval, town code, and ordinances. So that's the one step. But as Mr. Moore referred to, certificates of compliance are documents by which he submits something, and they're asking to see if these are legal lots of record. And by our town code, we actually have two choices: either issue a certificate of compliance or issue what's called a conditional certificate of compliance. And so the town did issue 4 conditional certificates of compliance. And what that actually means, it means that the lots do not meet any legal standards, do not meet our town code, and do not meet the state subdivision map, which, Gary, basically is the process you go to create legal lots. So in essence, those 4 certificates, which are recorded against the property, indicate those aren't legal lots of record. And as Mr. Moore indicated, he's asked you to submit an additional, the owner has submitted an additional 6 certificates of compliance, applications for 6 additional certificates. It's currently in a review process. It's fairly complicated. The last process took us 9 months to complete. So it takes quite a while. It's a lot of back and forth because he has a surveyor, engineer, we have to review it, and so on. So, but in terms of that process, that's all administrative or ministerial type process. Now, in terms of development and a subdivision map act does require public hearings in front of the planning commission. Depending on the threshold, it may have to go to town council. Public hearings do require us to mail out notices within 300 feet of all adjacent property owners within 300 feet of the property. So there would be noticing. It'd be an extensive process. Mr. Moore has a memo that's 2 or 3 pages that indicates what's the process to go through for the development. And it's available for public review. In fact, we could put it on the website. And so it's a quite extensive public process that is yet to be gone through, and we have not received any development application per se.
Yeah, I know there's a long way to go before any of this happens. It's at the very beginning, and I just wanted to go on record as being concerned.
Well, we appreciate you coming forward, and we know there's quite a list of folks who are involved and concerned, so we appreciate you coming tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Helen, would it give you a bit of comfort if we asked the manager in his manager's report, which he gives every month, if there is something to report on this property, to make a point of actually including it in his manager's report? So if nothing has gone on for that month, there's nothing. But as soon as something gurgles up, he'll make a point of discussing it.
Perfect. That's great. Thank you, David.
Thank you. Jessica?
Jessica Green.
I think you have to speak into the microphone before, bring it down.
Jessica Green, I had a couple questions. One is when you're talking about notifying people within 300 feet of the property, is that 300 feet of the parcel? Because some of these parcels have lots of land around them, which is 300 feet, where none of us might know about it because they're in the middle of the of the whole big 99 acres. So I'm wondering whether, people will know that are in the streets, Marinda and Ridgeway and places like that. That's one question I have.
As far as I know, Garrett, it would be from the parcel, right?
From the property line.
From the property line,
Right.
so from the 99 acres or
From
the parcel?
From the edge of the property line of the 99 acres, everyone within 300 feet will receive a notice.
Okay.
Okay, and I have another question. You know that there's a parcel at the top of Ridgeway where the guy built a huge fence around, I guess, his property.
Yes.
And I ran into one of the hikers that goes up there. I'm one of them too, but I hadn't seen it because I hadn't been there for a little while. And he said that we had seen a whole bunch of huge trucks going up the road, huge trucks. I don't know whether they're carrying soil or trees or what. And this guy said that that it looked like they were planting trees around parts of it along the fence, and he thought that it was because that way they were fast-growing trees that looked like they were planting, and that way they could build without, on a ridge top where you wouldn't see it because all these new trees were going to be there for that parcel. That guy.
Jessica, I think I can answer this because the gentleman that you're discussing is my next door neighbor whom I regularly interact with.
Yeah.
When Sunnyside went out of business, he just went in and, as I think many members of Fairfax did, went in and bought up a lot of their terrific stock. And, of course, as you know, the soils up there are rather, well, not very agreeable to a lot of plantings. That's why there's so much stuff not growing up there. So he imported soil, and soil was brought in, and now he's going to plant the trees in the new soil. But this is in no way a subterfuge to in any way do any building whatsoever, to my knowledge, on that site. And he and I think, are fairly candid with one another. And I certainly would be expressing to him that he should be making a very quick appointment with Mr. Moore, should that be the case. But I think I can tell you from my conversations with him, and I think he's a stand-up guy, that there's no development interest on his part, as far as a house or a structure or something like that.
Okay, because it looked like to him that it was going around the perimeter of the fence where it would be seen from the from below the ridge.
Yeah, I think you can plant a tree under our ridgeline ordinance. I don't know that it covers that. But as far as a structure goes, he and I chat all the time, and I'm certain that he would inform me if that was his intentions.
Well, maybe. The other thing is, what about trucks? If that's a fire road, is it legal for trucks to just go through up that fire road with that don't that are not fire
trucks? It is in
trucks?
his case because that is the only entrance to his property from that side, and that fire road, you can call it a fire road if you want, is also an access road to his property. So in fact, yes, is the answer.
That's not a fire road, though.
Okay, that's
No.
all I got for you. He can do
Okay.
that.
Okay, because it has a big chain across it.
And he has the key to the lock on the chain.
Yeah, I know. It's been cut a number of places with new padlocks.
Okay.
Well,
I think
anyway,
we want to wrap this up.
Okay, and I'm just concerned about the wall property also. So
Thank you.
That's it.
I think many of us are. Okay, any other members of the public want to speak in public expression? Okay, with that, we will move to presentation on the bridge projects. Garrett?
Great.
Would you like to do the staff report?
Sure. Actually, what I did was I asked Mr. Nader Tramome, our consulting engineer on the 5 bridge projects, to make a presentation. And so I loaded it up on PowerPoint, but I need to let him know that I think the versions are different. So what's going to show on the screen isn't what he and I saw earlier today. It's going to
Okay, and
look
can
a
we
little
keep
different.
this to 5 minutes?
That's the game plan.
Thank you.
Thank you, Garrett. Well, good evening. My name is Nader Tramome. I'm the project manager for these projects in the town of Fairfax. I represent the firm of California Infrastructure Consultancy. So tonight I'll give us a quick tour of where the projects are and what's going on. There would be a total of 5 bridges in town that are involved. 3 of them are lumped together as part of the what's called Bridge Preventive Maintenance Program. These are Canyon Road, Marin Road, and Spruce Road bridges on those roads. And the other 2 are Creek Road and Meadow Way. These 2 are undergoing their own type of program. So let's talk about Bridge Preventive Maintenance Program tonight on those 3 bridges. This program addresses only preventive maintenance needs of the bridges. Routine maintenance needs are not covered. It's part of a federal highway bridge program that funds 88.53% of the costs. And the projects are currently in preliminary design and environmental phase. Eventually, these bridges will come out looking exactly the same as they are today, except their issues will be fixed. So there's no change to design. We conducted the field review with Caltrans late last year. That field review charts the environmental studies for these projects. Starting with Canyon Road Bridge, on one side of the bridge doesn't have any wing walls, and essentially what's acting as protection of the bank on each side of the bridge is a stack of concrete cement bags. These have cracked and they are loose, and they will eventually fall over and expose the embankment to erosion. On the other side, the same thing. The wing wall is very short, and there's a pipe that comes out and has eroded the embankment. So we are fixing these. Actually, we're putting in concrete walls to retain the embankment. Canyon Road Bridge as well. The wooden rails are not safe and standard. They will be replaced with metal beam guard rails, and the treatment on those will be done so that it would blend in with the environment and the setting. Moving on to Marine Road Bridge, again we have a wing wall that's fallen over and rotated, and it's unstable. So we will be connecting this back up to the bridge and stabilizing the ground around it. There are cracks on the opposite side wing wall. We'll be putting in riprap under the wing wall and filling the crack just to give this bridge some additional 20, 30 years of life. The third one in that program is Spruce Road Bridge. There are numerous cracks in the surface that let water and other fluids leach through, and so we will be taking the asphalt off and sealing the deck with what is called polyester concrete, and that's what it's going to prevent is the leaching of the concrete chemicals through concrete. Creek Road Bridge is a primarily seismic retrofit program for the bridge. The bridge has been known to be seismically vulnerable. Again, it's part of the Highway Bridge program that will pay 88.5% of the funds for it. Again, we did field review with Caltrans on January 6th on that, and since then the bridge has launched into its environmental program and preliminary design. Again, there will be no change to the shape of the bridge. There will be essentially fixes that would make that bridge earthquake resistant. I just put in a couple of slides about what happened to that erosion of the abutment that ended up closing the bridge for a couple of years back in 05 through 08, something like that time period. That's been stabilized with heavy riprap, no problem anymore. So we'll continue the program with fixing the superstructure from essentially falling off of its supports. This is a support. They're very narrow. During a seismic event, they can fall down, and they'll be essentially held together with the superstructure and substructure with these cable restrainers. This is an example of one from another project that we've done. Another vulnerability is the columns. These are thin columns with very minimal reinforcement in them. Next slide shows what happens in a major earthquake. This is from the earthquake in southern back in 1983. I'm sorry, 93. I forget the name of the earthquake. I'm sorry. But anyway, so to prevent that, we will be actually putting infill walls between the columns. I think we may have skipped that's essentially the gap between the columns is going to be closed with walls, and that prevents the columns from falling over sideways and cracking like you saw in the previous slide. And this is an example of, again, what happens. There will be a reinforcement and a wall put in between the columns. The other work that we will be doing is stabilizing the bridge from going forward, falling over forward, and that Again, we won't have to go back to that slide, but moving forward, part of the bridge fixes will be also doing its preventive maintenance, addressing those issues. There's numerous spalls and cracks in the concrete that will be fixed as part of this program. We've applied to add that to the program. The fifth bridge in the program is Creek Road Bridge. This is a bridge that's been identified by Caltrans as functionally obsolete. The bridge is also susceptible to very bad scour. As you can see here, it's been undermined, and it's an unsafe bridge. The bridge is we did a scoping phase on the bridge to see what really needs to be done, and we finished the scoping, did the field review with Caltrans, figured out what it needs to go through environmentally, and we're currently waiting for Caltrans to iron out the funding issues, the scoping. We're negotiating with Caltrans to fund the next phase of the project, and when that happens, we will be having another public workshop with the neighbors and those who are interested to decide exactly what to do with the future of crossing at that site. I believe that's about all we had to present, and with that, I'm open to answer any questions you might have.
So I'll bring it back to the council first before we open it up to the public. Any members of the council have questions?
Yeah, just to get a sense of time frame. So take the Creek Road Bridge. The critical path, as we call it on these, is the environmental. And we've just begun the environmental studies on these, all the fauna and flora studies, and they take anywhere from 18 to 24 months minimum. And once that's concluded, in the meantime, we will have done the preliminary design, and another 4 or 5 months to finish the final design. We'd have to wait for the environmental studies to be concluded. So currently, Creek Road is, 2015. The way we anticipate that would be going to construction in late 2017. And it will, since we will be working in the creek, we'd have to actually wait until 2018, April 15th through October 15th of 2018 to do the work that is entailed in the creek itself. Okay, and just one other question on a completely different type of bridge project, which would be the Canyon Bridge. So when you've got only one way in and out,
correct.
I would imagine people would be interested to know what is the alternative route that's created there. Right.
The bridge will stay open about 99 through 99% of its construction time, or even more, because most of the work that we're doing is down below. The equipment and materials will be lowered down with small cranes onto the creek bed, and most of the work is down below. The only work that's been done at the deck level is that, again, we're sealing the deck on that, and that's like a 4 or 5 hour operation that we think at this point will be done late at night during the non-rush traffic hours. And the way we've talked about it is that we will set up emergency crews on the far side of the bridge, and the bridge will be openable in case of an emergency. This is just a deck seal. It's a different type of deck seal from what we're putting on Spruce Road, and they can just plop plywood on the deck, and cars can go in a pinch if they need to. So it can be opened for emergencies.
Thank you.
Most welcome.
So I have a question going back to Meadow Way Bridge. I thought we still had further assessment to do, at least going back to that slide. Maybe if you move back to the Meadow Way Bridge slides, it sure looked like we could start preliminary design, and I thought we had further assessment work to do.
We've done some assessment. In fact, one of the things that I skipped over was that part of that the assessment that we performed was geotechnical borings, and found that the site to be liquefiable to a depth of 50 feet below the ground. Also, that the length of these timber piles that hold up the bridge are totally unknown. There's no record drawings on any of the bridges. The only record drawing of the 40 bridges that exist in this watershed is a couple of sheets for Canyon Road Bridge. So we found the ground to be vulnerable. Caltrans has also said that because the bridge is functionally obsolete, any repairs or rehabilitation of the bridge would end up only perpetuating the functional obsolescence of the bridge.
But just to interrupt you, I think my question was, it was my understanding we still have assessment to do. I'm sorry to interrupt.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Garrett, maybe you can fill us in.
Perhaps to add is, yes, it's a somewhat of a catch-22. So we still have some more assessments to do, but we ran out of funding. And so we need Caltrans to approve funding for preliminary design based on what we've always started with. They've always based this on replacement, so we could finish our discussion, get our further analysis, and then talk some more to Caltrans and be able to meet with the neighborhood with all our findings.
And what is the types of assessment you need to do?
We still need to finish the right-of-way. I think we still needed more money for that. The other things, it just escapes me right at
So I think one
moment.
of the things the people in the area were very concerned about was, number one, replacing that bridge, but also it was my understanding that we had quite a bit of study before we even got into even preliminary design, but it sounds like not so much.
Well, no, it's more of a catch-22. We need money for the preliminary design phase. But part of the money for preliminary design is for Mr. Talinay's time, our outreach consultants' time, and everyone else's time, so they can come to a meeting to be able to talk about what some of their findings are. We still need to write it up in a report. We still need to do some right-of-way analysis. So while a lot is complete, a lot isn't complete in related to making sure we have enough information so we can answer all those questions that we know will arise once we raise different issues.
Okay, thank you. So other members of the council? Okay, go ahead, Peter.
So this, regarding Meadow Way, this liquefaction issue, are any of the other bridges in town subject to those same liquefaction hazards?
It really is impossible to say without specifically going to each one of these sites and drilling borings to 40, 50 feet below the ground to determine whether the soil types, water level, groundwater level, those two are the factors that lead to liquefaction.
Okay, so those particular liquefaction investigations haven't been done for the other bridges?
No, they have not been. No.
Okay. And then I know you have to do assessments and so forth, but are you getting a general sense that the Meadow Way Bridge is so obsolete that it would need to be torn down and replaced, or?
Well, that's a tough question to answer.
I think before we go there, I think we need to understand more about the issues around that bridge before we make that speculation. I think people are very concerned with the possibility of replacing that bridge, so I don't think we want to speculate till we have the information, if that's all right.
So what we'll do is when we get all that information, our game plan was we would have a meeting with the neighborhood, let the council know, have a meeting with the neighborhood, and just kind of explain reasons for everything. Because we're really pushing Caltrans hard for definitive answers on all the issues.
Thank you.
That, let's open it up to members of the public. If anybody wants to speak. Frank, would you like to speak?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Frank Ager, 13 Meadow Way. On the issue of functionally obsolete, there are a number of bridges here in California that are functionally obsolete. The Golden Gate Bridge is functionally obsolete. The reason this bridge is functionally obsolete is because it's a one-lane bridge. They say they have a liquefaction report that says it's susceptible to earthquakes. The neighborhood needs to see that report. I guess there's engineering data that they have out on that. I haven't seen the report, and they should make all of this public to the town council. As far as what that bridge is, no one seems to know about it. The Corps of Engineers built that bridge in 1956. It's a railroad trestle bridge. That bridge will stand long after most of the concrete bridges in town are collapsed because of an earthquake. That bridge can hold, will stand up forever. But anyway, we need to see the data. You know, it's easy to say for the consultant to say it's why it's functionally obsolete, why liquefaction will collapse the bridge, why it can't make it an earthquake. But there's got to be engineering data that backs that all up.
I think right now Garrett said that one of our problems is to write up the reports is we need more funding. So as soon as those reports are available, we will make them available. I think our engineer was just stating what he had seen based on the data.
Yeah,
so that will be made available.
I think our game plan is it'd just be one big package. Here's the base analysis. Here's all the backup data. In fact, we're going to make everything available to the public. If they want to go through all of it, that's fine by us.
And what, I know it's difficult dealing with Caltrans. They're kind of slow. But do we have an idea of when we're going to be able to get some funding so we can start getting that going?
Let's see, it's been 6 to 9 months, I think, since we made the request, but it looks like we actually may get something back within 60 days.
Okay, so then subsequent to that, then we would write the reports and have everything available. So we're hopeful in about 4 months or so, maybe we would have things available.
That's a very good timeline, really. That's about what we're thinking about having the next workshop with the neighborhood.
And I will tell you, Frank, it was the Northridge earthquake where that was the that bridge gone.
No, I guarantee you hit an 8.0 here, that bridge is going to be standing.
Okay.
But anyway, the town should know that the neighbors have surveys that show that where you think you're going to put the bridge is on private property. So what we're waiting for is the environmental review. Since it's federal money, it'll need an EIS, and some state money, it's going to need an EIR, and so the neighborhood was awaiting for the start of that process.
Actually, if it's federal money, it doesn't require an EIS. It would be an EIR if the CEQA checklist showed that we needed to do more than a mitigated negative declaration.
Well, there's no way that's going to qualify for a big mitigated negative.
I think let's stay tuned on that. But yeah, I mean, first we need to get all the reports out that we have so that we can have this forum and then start looking at what the options are and then doing the CEQA analysis.
Okay, we've seen the preliminary work they've done and what the work they're showing between the retaining walls and the bridge. It's definitely not CEQA exempt. It is, and you can't do a mitigated deck either.
Okay, I've done a lot of CEQA, Frank.
Great, thank you.
And so we go through the checklist, we make the decision. I don't think with me on this council, we're going to short circuit that. So let's see where we go from here. But I think our first step is get the reports out before we do the CEQA analysis and meet with the community. So I think we're talking about 4 or 5 months from now.
Okay, thank you.
Is that good? Okay, thank you. So any other public comment on this item? Seeing none, I'll bring it back. Push the button. I'll bring it back to the council. Any other ending comments? This is really just a report. We don't need a motion. Okay, with that, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And let's move on to consent calendar. I have a question on, before we open it up to public comment, Mr. Sargent, we talk about these things a little bit, but we will open it up. First of all, I want to ask, I know there's 2 items we want to have a quick discussion on. I have a question on one of the other items, and I think, does anybody want to pull anything off consent? None of these things that I've just discussed need to be pulled off consent.
Let me just go through some stuff. On the minutes of February 23rd, Michelle, It noted that I was both absent and voting yes on the two items. Certainly, I would have voted yes on the two items had I been here, but that good I'm not. That would be page 1 of the February 23rd minutes. And I can just forward that to you.
The special meeting?
I got it.
He's got it.
Yeah, I got it.
The other two items are, I would like to pull number 5, and I see that Ms. Catherine Wan is here, and certainly as a courtesy, we should provide the opportunity to speak.
David, I was going to bring that up. We're going to have our auditor speak for a moment and Ann speak for a moment, but before we do that, do you have any other corrections?
No, not on the minutes.
I have one correction on the minutes on page 8 for the regular meeting. And this is just nitpicking. The Marin Energy Authority has been called the Marin Clean Energy for a year and a half. So it's not Marin Energy Authority, it's Marin Clean Energy. Otherwise, I have no problems with the minutes. And I did have a question on item 5, but since we're going to pull that off.
May I add a correction from the minutes from the regular meeting? Page 3, it is my obligation to correct my son's last name. So, for the record, the last name, this is paragraph 1, 2, 3, 4, Cheripanov, Tcherepanov. Thank you. And I have a couple of additions to number 7, which I'm hoping doesn't mean it needs to be pulled, but it's important and it may need to be pulled.
Well, why don't you just cover what those items are?
Do you want me to go for it now?
Yeah.
Okay, so number 7 is the approval of the Agricultural Community Events Farmers Market to continue in Bolinas Park. Let me just pull it up. So in the contract, the restrictions, this is Exhibit B in the restrictions and requirements. If you go to the second page, the first paragraph on the second page, it says, but the grantee must empty the receptacles at the end of each evening. Grantees may use the Public Works dumpsters at the end of each evening to dispose of food and paper trash. So first of all, we should never put that food goes into the trash. This is something that we may need to work out in our contract negotiations, Garrett, in that there has been a problem with where the food, the compostable, the clean food, which is the gold potential compost, goes. We do not have a system that can take it at this point. So if we could negotiate something with Kelly from the farmers market as to how that's going to be treated so that it gets disposed of properly, and just look at that paragraph. So there are blue carts in the courtyard, which are being referred to as the dumpsters in the Public Works. So the blue can be for paper and cardboard, but then we'll have to deal with the green waste.
Tell you what, I'll just work out the issues with Kelly directly, but I think I understand what you're saying.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
And I have one question on an item that I think we can leave on the agenda, which is the adoption of the resolution accepting the mid-year budget review. We talk about Manzanita, and I believe that we talked about that we were going to seek FEMA reimbursement for Manzanita.
Are you talking about item 10?
Yeah, item 10.
It's on the regular agenda?
Oh, I'm sorry.
So you just jumped ahead too soon.
I apologize. Jumping. Okay. So with that, John, did you want to have one of the items pulled off consent, or did you want to speak on one of the items?
I can do either one. You either pull number 5 off, or I can speak to it now.
David already asked to pull number 5 off.
Okay.
So we're going to do that. So we'll take that up separately.
Great.
Okay. And Mark, did you have something?
Yeah, just a quick one on the farmers market. Where we live is a really odd acoustic place, whereas the music in the park sounds louder at our house than if you're standing next to it in the park. So, when they amplify the music, a lot of times it's at a level that shouldn't be heard at our house. So I don't know what the acoustic requirements are in the contract, but I know that there have been a couple of other complaints concerning the volume of the music from the farmers market. So if that could be addressed, that would be great. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. All right, with that, why don't we have our auditor speak briefly on item 8.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and council members. My name is Catherine Yuan. I'm the engagement partner for Mason Associates. I was the engagement partner for the town's 2014 audit. Just really quickly, we performed the audit of the town's financial statement, and also we calculated the appropriation limit for fiscal year 2013 and 14. The town received an unmodified opinion for the audit, which is essentially the clean opinion. And also, the town implemented GASB 65, Statement 65, which made some format changes on the financial statements, but there was no significant changes in accounting treatment. The last thing I would like to mention is that this year there was a great improvement in the timeliness of the financial statements issuance. For the last 5 years, the average issuance time was 16 months after year end. This year, with great effort from the town staff and the support of the council, it took only 8.5 months after year end for the issuance, so which is essentially half the time of what it used to take. So you should be very proud of yourself, because it's a significant achievement. So I would like to thank the support of the council and also town staff for your cooperation during this year's audit. With that, I would like to answer any questions that you may have.
I think because we're just accepting the report, we won't be asking
Oh,
questions.
okay, sorry.
And we've already met in our finance committee, so I thank you so much.
Thank you.
And then we'll also have Ann Manus speak briefly just on item 6. So we're not pulling these items, we're just getting a brief update.
Hi, good evening, Mayor and council members. Thanks for having me. Peter, I'm Ann Manus. Nice to meet you. You have the staff report. I'm here just to answer questions. So if there's any questions on the update on Focus, which is now being changed to Fairfax Recreation. And that's kind of the main thing that kind of was pulled out of the report, one of the highlights. So.
Oh, I ask you the same question every year you show up. You write a great memo. How much more money do you need?
We're actually doing fine. I feel very supported. I think we're in a good spot. The addition of the gymnastics program in our contracts have been very beneficial. I think we're in good space. I think Garrett works through whatever the needs are, and we adjust things. So it looks good.
And just a question I have is, I know we've been looking to expand the youth center, which I think we should also call the senior center, because I think we want to do more senior things, and thank you for what you've done. Mm-hmm. Have we ever thought about doing things like moving to the women's club or the pavilion for that? I know that would probably be messy, but I'm just wondering, maybe I should ask Garrett this question.
Yeah, I mean, as far as the use of the community center, it's definitely being used much more than it was 3 or 4 years ago. And we could have seniors meet there. I think surveying them a little bit more and finding out what they want, the women's club might be more appropriate. And if they want to do more fitness things, then of course the pavilion. But that is an area that we're working on, and I'm involved with the Aging Friendly Task Force with Jody Timms. And
I think I was just asking you about, so the youth center's really small, and we've talked about trying to do something. And so my suggestion is, could we move here, or is that a problem, Garrett?
Well, I think it's something we would talk with Ann and staff about. A lot of times it's availability of facilities. A lot of times demand's not there yet.
Okay.
But they do movie night in the pavilion, and they do it here. They do it at the pavilion if there's greater demand. And so those are things that we're looking about. If the programs increase or we add programs, using other facilities are all on the table.
Okay.
We just need to figure that all out.
Okay, thank you.
So just a quick question. I'm just wondering, do you get any kind of input, feedback about facilities from teachers and people who are working for Focus or Fairfax Recreation?
So the survey we put out a survey from September to January, and part of the questions in the survey was, what do you think of our facilities? And there was a scale from 1 to 5 on their satisfaction. And in the report, people have reported that they're satisfied or very satisfied with the facilities. So I think the survey was attached to the staff report, so you can look. We got about 250 responses, so that's about 3% of the community responding, and none of them were giving any big, huge comments about their unhappiness around the facilities. So, of course, everyone would like things a little bit more polished, but for what it's being used for, I think people are satisfied.
And are you finding that there's more demand for rentals than we can actually accommodate? I mean, I know it's being used a lot.
It's being used a lot more. The visibility of the program is becoming more apparent, and I think that's because we're being pushed, or we've pushed the program to have the catalog going into everyone's mailbox, and that's going to be something that's happening not just once a year, but twice a year now. So people are learning that, yes, you can rent the facilities. Birthday party rentals have gone up a lot since last year. The pavilion is very actively used. There's demand. I think it would be nice to see the money that's coming in from all this revenue, from the contracts on the gymnastics program, CYO. All those are going to keep going up because we did the grandfathered in $50 an hour. That's going to all be coming in the next fiscal year. So it would be really nice to kind of carve that money out and have some allocation to fix some of these things that are really aging. So.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, Peter, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
The Fairfax Moms program, is that open for? Sure. The Fairfax Moms program, is that also open to dads? Because I know a couple of single dads that.
Yes. Yeah. So Fairfax Moms is active. It's a family group, really, and there's 80 active families that are involved. And our new moms and babies group, we do have new dads coming to those activities. And it's very open to dads
I'll
as
spread
well.
the word.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
And I just want to, I think I can speak on behalf of all of us to congratulate you on all you've created here and all the hard work, and it is really showing up, and we feel like we really have our own recreation department, which has been a long time in coming, and you guys have taken it to great heights in a very short time. So I look forward to being able to make sure that it keeps on chugging along.
Keeps
Thank
going.
you.
Good, thanks.
Thank
I love working for the town. It's amazing working with the staff. Feel very supported by you all, so thank you.
Thank you, Ann. Yeah. So with that, I don't think there's any public comment on the consent calendar. So with that, I'd like a motion to approve the consent calendar. However, we're going to remove item 5, and we'll take that up when we start our regular agenda, if that's okay. And so I'd like a motion to approve the consent calendar with the changes for the minutes.
I have one change on that February 23rd minute.
Okay.
Which is that I was actually, instead of David, I was the person who made the vote.
On the special meeting.
Just a minor clerical correction.
Okay. So I'd like a motion with the, thank you, Peter, with the changes in the minutes.
All right, let me try this.
Go ahead.
With the revisions to the minutes forwarded to the clerk, to approve the entire consent calendar except for number 5, which I would suggest that we move at the end of 14. So it would become the traditional last issue on the council.
Okay, second? Who wants a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Item 5 will become the very last item. So let's move on to John, did you want to take it as after when we start the regular agenda? Okay, well, let's just start it when I suggested, which would be before item 10. I don't think we're going to belabor this very long, hopefully. So we'll move it there. So with that friendly amendment to the motion, all in favor? Aye. Okay. So now let's move on to council member reports, and we do have an agreement that we try to keep them to 3 minutes, although I know some people don't like that. So let's take it from Peter's end first. Are you ready for your council member? Why don't we start from David's? We can start from David's end first.
I attended the MCCMC Ledge Committee, quite critical. As we all know, the session has just about ended, and the final bills will be coming forward, so there'll be a much more robust conversation and discussion about what MCCMC will be, or what the League of Cities actually will be promoting as good legislation and not. I've also brought up a conversation with our other council colleagues about an article and a particular bill that was promoted dealing with artificial turf and the dangers. There was a front page story in the Cron about 2 Sundays, I think, ago, and there was I thought, a very thoughtful and measured bill being brought forward. So we will have that on the next MCMC meeting. On the dinner thing, I'm going to defer to Renee, because I think that she will want to speak at a greater length about Dr. Willis's excellent presentation. I also got to sub in for Renee on the MCCMC homelessness meeting that is very well chaired by our colleague over in San Rafael and very well attended as we move forward, hopefully with our ethical responsibility to attend for those who are precariously housed or are long-term homeless, and to meet our moral obligations in that regard. The Flood Zone 9, we continue to move forward on that issue, particularly on the issue of detention basins, which ones, where they're going to be, and funding. Ross Valley Fire Department, of course, with John, who now chairs the Ross Valley Fire Department. I'll leave it to you. And Renee and I met with the registrar of voters to discuss the issue of voting for 16 and 17-year-olds. And I must say the registrar and the assistant registrar attended the meeting, extraordinarily thoughtful considerations on their part, limitations, excitement, opportunities. And at the close of that meeting, having now met with the registrar, having read and communicated across the country with people who were doing this, also having discussed it with the IJ, Channel 5, and KQED's forum, I think it now will be time for Renee and I to schedule a meeting with our town attorney to discuss the elections code and what it says on this matter. And with that, I think I've come under 3 minutes. Thanks.
Thank you, David. John?
Good deal. I'm not going to set a timer, but I bet you make it under the 3 minutes. So I won't mention the celebratory Measure Right party at your house.
Measure J party?
Yeah, Measure J. I can't remember my own handwriting. I've spent a lot of time in the last month interviewing a whole lot of different people in the community who basically work a lot with doing volunteer projects around. I mean, this is in conjunction with a subcommittee of the volunteer board that I've been. Okay. This has been in conjunction with a subcommittee of the volunteer board where we've basically been talking to different people that do a lot of things voluntarily for the community, and what kind of things would make it work better, what kind of things would be more involvement, and what kind of things are needed in the community. And it's very interesting depending on who you talk to. There's different needs that are identified, from mental health counseling for the homeless population, which is huge and probably outside perhaps our scope here, but everything that we can do can help, to basically making people more supported and getting outreach information out there. But in case anybody's new to around here, it's a pretty good community for people caring about things and doing a lot of volunteer stuff. Let me see. David mentioned the fire board. I attended that also, and it was not a significantly earth-shattering meeting or anything like that. But let me see. I attended GPIC here also. Is there something that you wanted to mention for that meeting?
Just that you deservedly had the respect of your colleagues to appoint you to be the head of the fire board for the coming year.
Oh, well, thank you for that, but I wasn't going to talk for it. Whatever. Okay, also a GPIC meeting in this very room. They meet on the second Thursday of the month, in case people are interested in general plan and how that all fits together in terms of the future around the town. Let me see, a special council meeting here. You don't basically volunteer board, the MCCMC, and the Transportation Authority of Marin, which was very interesting in terms of learning all about, there's a lot of regional issues, and the main thing that's in the paper a lot seems to be the Richmond-San Rafael Bridge, third lane project. And it's amazing how many layers of government there are and what needs to be satisfied. But that is actually getting compressed quite a lot and will hopefully result in a lot of time savings for a regional traffic issue. There was also a very interesting section of that where it was more connected with the SMART thing and SMART report and the fact that access to the SMART train in the new stations is not worked out, shall we say. I personally feel it's very important to have access to that if it's going to be a functional thing, and I think the SMART board probably agrees that it's important to have people to be able to get to that train in order to use it. Getting cooperation from the city of San Rafael has been something that I've always wanted more cooperation on there in terms of the bike routes there. I mean, they're intermittent, little pieces of it are here and there, but it doesn't go all the way there, and I think that a lot of attention needs to be brought to that. And we certainly heard from the public at that meeting. And I would underline many of the things that were said there. And if you care about this issue, please speak up. Another thing I've been working on a lot is the trails, the Fairfax trails system around town, basically itemizing addresses of where they all are and various people that live close by to the trails. This is something we've talked about here at this meeting a few months back, and progress is being made. So that's my report.
Thank you, John. Renee?
Yeah, so a good portion of my time this month has been spent around the Ross Valley Healthy Communities Collaborative. That's not the right word. Healthy Community Collaborative. And we began with going to the Tam Union High School District board meeting, which was in itself a very interesting experience in that they are going through some major transitions, but we did request the funding, as we have from the Ross Valley School District and the town of San Anselmo and town of Fairfax, and we have now received full funding to pay for a coordinator to move this collaborative forward. And with the idea that there are other funding sources out there, and we will be exploring that and revisiting this in 6 months. So we did hold a meeting, and about 30 members of the collaborative came together at White Hill Middle School, and we met with Chief Morin and Chief Cusimano from Central Marin Police Authority, and it was an opportunity for parents to ask questions, like, how do you do it here? What if you see a kid who's up in Central Field smoking or drinking, and what do you do? How does this work? What are the protocols? This is what we want. It was an excellent interchange between law enforcement and members of the community who are greatly concerned about teenage drug and alcohol use and abuse. I attended something that I think needs to be put on everybody's radar, which is that San Francisco is working on an ordinance to require a product stewardship, meaning that the pharmaceutical industry would be required to pay for the take-back and safe disposal of unused and unwanted meds, which we know now are wreaking havoc on our water system, certainly into our wastewater, and into the hands of our youth and adults, as I've mentioned before. So I attended the public hearing in San Francisco. Unanimously, the Committee on Government Oversight voted to send it to the full Board of Supervisors. It will be coming next week. They're following in the footsteps of Alameda County, who've gone quite a distance in this, and our working group in Marin County began last week. We're planning on beginning the crafting of an ordinance here, which will go to the Board of Supervisors for an initial presentation sometime in the end of March. So please stay tuned. It's exciting, and multiple stakeholders in Marin County, from the sanitation districts to law enforcement to parents to educators, are involved in this, and being run by the Department of Health and Human Services. The award of the bid to do the repaving of the pavilion parking lot is actually sort of important. That was our special meeting, in that we will be having a repaving project, and you will not recognize the beautiful pavilion parking lot in the next, it's coming. So stay tuned for that. There was a tree committee meeting. The Marin County MC dinner was a presentation about these collaboratives and coalitions, and Dr. Matt Willis presented on our statistics and what we're dealing with in the county in terms of drug abuse. I'm trying, Barbara. The tree, I think I mentioned that, and Javid and I went to the registrar, and it was very interesting to hear their input, and we'll explore. So I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Renee. Peter, and so we sort of have a agreement that we'll try to stay under 3 minutes. You got that sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Well, I had some very productive meetings with Garrett, with Mike Vivret.
You might want to really speak closely into the microphone, since you speak kind of softly.
Sure.
So we want to make sure everybody can hear you.
I had some very good meetings with Mike Vivret, Garrett Toy, and Jim Moore, just getting kind of oriented with where things are with the town. It was very, very helpful, especially to get a good overview, Mike, of the financing and accounting system, so that'll be very helpful. And then I also attended the Affordable Housing joint meeting with the Planning Commission, going over the general plan updates. That was very good meeting. Went over a lot of the nuts and bolts of the upcoming changes to the housing element, and had a lot of really good input from both committees and from the members of the public too that also had some very good insights. So that's about all I have to report. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Peter. So now I have to stay within my 3 minutes. So I attended the Marin Clean Energy Board meeting, and their rates are going to increase slightly in the spring, but they will still be less than PG&E rates. Garrett and I meet monthly with the Chamber of Commerce, and one of the things we discussed is some signs by the Chamber that would point people to our downtown area, and they're working on a pretty attractive kind of approach that'll help people understand where our downtown is. I attended the Fairfax Climate Action Committee meeting, and one of our big pushes is to get more people involved in deep green for Marin Clean Energy. That's really the biggest bang for the buck on the greenhouse gas emissions reductions. Also, Larry Bragman convened a meeting with myself and the Marin Medical Reserve Corps to talk about how they can sort of fit in with our disaster work. And so our disaster council will be convened sometime in April, and the branch manager will be a representative. So I think they bring a lot to the table. Also attended a meeting of the Town Finance Committee, which Renee also participated in as the vice mayor. I attended the special town council meeting, which Renee mentioned, and along with discussing the pavilion parking lot, I received authority from the members of the council that were there to sign on to an amicus brief to be submitted to the Supreme Court to support freedom to marry. And this is a brief from mayors across the country in support. It will be filed on March 6th, and they have 225 mayors signed on. They did send a note around to say, be quiet about this, because they're going to have a public rollout. But we had an open session on it, and they didn't ask for that. So so stay tuned for that when the Supreme Court takes that up this year. Hopefully things will change in our lifetimes. I did attend the Joint Affordable Housing Committee Planning Commission meeting. I'm a member of the Affordable Housing Committee. I attended a board meeting of the Community Media Center of Marin, and one of the key items is they're starting the Marin Media Corps for high school students. It'll start soon. It's $25 a year. It trains students with hands-on training, and they get to film local events. And after the course, they come out as skilled media leaders. They also receive high school credit, so it's only $25. And it's going to be a great program. It's a new program for them. And any of you who have attended any of their classes, they're just, it's really high class, and the kids will learn a lot, and it's very inexpensive. I also attended the countywide public disaster and emergency preparedness meeting, and Cindy Swift also has been attending with me, a member of the public. And they're very excited about us starting our disaster council, and one of the things Cindy agreed to do was kind of be the lead on our CERT-trained people in Fairfax, so when she becomes part of the disaster council, when we formally kick that off. I also, yesterday, spent a couple of hours up in Sky Ranch with most board member and San Anselmo Open Space Chair, Jonathan Braun, and really got to see what it looks like up there. There were tons of trash and all kinds of things that the owners had to clear out before as part of the contract, but there's still plenty to be done. And the sad state of where the horses were kept, and it just looks very dangerous. It looks like very unstable land. The buildings look like you could just push them over. So there's still quite a lot of work to be done. And one of the things we're trying to get a feel for is restoration efforts and what that will be. And it will be different if the horses do come back. A lot of that responsibility will be the horse people, but we won't know that for a little while yet. So stay tuned, and that's all I have to announce. So with that, I think we'll turn it over to the town manager for your report. Garrett, please.
Sure, I actually have a brief report. One is like to thank our finance director, Mike Fiverette, for his work on the clean audits. Thank Anne and Camille for their hard work on our recreation programs. Of course, the auditor and the farmers market, Kelly, left, so I can't thank them for their work. But some things, one is you'll notice the sound system. So we did do actually improvements to the sound system. It is 30 years old. It is a hand-me-down, but we did check out all the mics so that they would work. We had to rewire. We also had to make, I think we had to repair the amplifier because it had a short. We actually added speakers, the speakers being the type then that so it's made more for speech in these type of environments. And when it comes to sound, what we've noticed is the wireless mics are actually louder than these mics. So if we turn up the sound so people can hear us on these mics, when you speak into the wireless mics, it'll be really loud. But it feeds directly onto the online system, so now it picks it up directly as opposed to ambient. So thank the town clerk for her efforts on that. And then what I'd like to also report on is kind of the slew of capital improvement projects that you may have noticed around town. One that's finished are the Center Street crosswalks. The flashing beacon systems are in. I've checked them out during the day. It's actually works pretty well in the strobe. Going to drive back tonight, see how they work. Of course, I may have to stop and push the button. Need to point out to people that they only work when you push the button. I've already seen several people cross without pushing the button. So if you want to push my button, push that button. So some other improvements, as Councilmember Goddard indicated, Bank Street Pavilion parking lot. I'm hopeful that that will begin next week to get that project started. You'll notice that they were doing work to repair the street light on Bolinas. I think that's going to take a few days. They're doing some undergrounding work to improve that. And lastly, some of the projects occurring in this building this month we'll be doing improvements to enhance the ADA and the larger bathroom, redoing those cabinets, among other things, and hopefully putting a lift right here in the corner so we can make the stage more accessible. Within that, although it'll probably take more than 30 days, is we do plan to replace everything up here so it actually be movable. So your tables will be movable. The blue wall will no longer exist. It'll be replaced with a black curtain that would have the town seal on it and then could be covered up when people want to use the stage. So with that, that concludes the town manager's report.
Just a question. I think we have preliminary go-ahead on the TAM funding to complete the bike spine.
Oh, yes, and actually John, Councilmember Reed, who sits on the TAM board, but the TAM advisory committee actually made a recommendation to fund our request for the completion of the Class 1 bike lane for the bike spine. So that gap that goes from basically, where is it, Shemron?
Well, actually from Glen Drive.
From Glen Drive, that's it, Glen Drive. You'll see a Class 1 bike lane that would go in both directions. Hopefully that gets funded. That's a $300,000 plus project. They'll fund up to $300,000. We'll have to allocate a little funding to finish it off. That'd be an excellent project if it actually gets approved. And the other thing is we have a little sub-grant that's about for $25,000, and that's to put in another flashing beacon system at right there on Sir Francis Drake near the Barefoot Cafe to provide safety for kids crossing the street.
I had a quick question. I'm not sure if you want to report anything on the online forum. Is this a time to do that?
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's on my notes that I didn't read. Yes, as the council will remember, one of our efforts on the communication plan was to launch what we call Peak Democracy. Peak Democracy is an online forum. It's actually active now on the TOM website. One of the key tenets of it, and actually the pilot program, is comments on a pilot residential parking system. So that's on there right now. It's an ability, you register, and then you just answer the questions. You have to see the responses. Everyone can see everyone's responses. It has different functions to be able, from when we report back to council. One of the things we'll be doing is a letter will be going out to the neighborhood, that's the pilot area, as well as some adjacent neighborhoods, letting them know about the online forum so they can comment. I believe in the staff report I said I would also have kind of an open house type meeting. Still need to arrange for that, but hopefully everyone participates in the forum. And this is a good test case. If it works well, we would definitely use it for other issues that may come up for the town.
So Garrett, can you just make it very clear, how does someone go there? What does it say on the website that links? What's it called? Just so people are totally clear, and please visit it.
It's on the right-hand side of the homepage, right?
Yes, you looked at it. It is on the right-hand side. It's got its own green bar. It's called Community Forum. It's run by a company, not a private company, called Peak Democracy. So your responses are, well, they're online. We can all see them. But you actually leave our website and go to theirs. Did you have other questions about it?
I think that's great, and I think it looks great. So thank you, Garrett. Are there any other notes you need to consult that you may have forgotten? Anything else?
No, I believe that covers it.
Okay, I'm wondering if everyone wouldn't mind a 5-minute restroom break. I elected to mention at the beginning of this meeting that we're having technical difficulties, so we're not on live. The video will be posted on the website probably late tomorrow, and it'll be rebroadcast on Channel 27. However, our voices will be dubbed, so it'll be like watching a poor foreign movie where our mouths will be moving at different times. But luckily, we're not covering lots of topics tonight. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started, but get John Sargent in here for his issue. So we're going to talk about, John, you can't, okay, very good. We're going to talk about item 5 first. Garrett? Garrett, would you like to cover the staff report on item 5? No, John, we'll call you. You're not up yet.
Okay. So this item is actually asking for authority for the town manager to purchase and install 4 electronic bike lockers. We refer to them as e-lockers per a grant we received from the Bay Area Air Quality Management District. And the other action is to appropriate $30,000 for the e-lockers, of which $20,000 would be from the grant and $13,000 in matching funds from the town. So this all goes back in about August 2014. We actually finalized our agreement for a grant for 4 electronic e-lockers. And what that can do is that can accommodate 8 bikes within the lockers. You have a card system, you swipe your card, and then you can put your bike in, and then it charges you a certain amount for how long you're in there. Originally, our application identified the location as the parkade. What we've done, though, in our field review, we noticed that we're either going to lose parking spaces or we're going to have to do something about the trees because they're solar powered. So what we did is we looked at other locations and discovered that a good location for 3 of the e-lockers would actually be by the Bike Museum in Clawson Sir Francis Drake. There, it could be located there. It actually doesn't lose any parking. They're very enthusiastic about the concept, and so we're thinking that'd be a good location. Actually, the Bay Area Air Quality Management District approved that location, so we have 2 locations now, either Parkade or that location. What this item is before you is to really authorize us to go ahead and move forward with the project. We would install 3 lockers in front of the Bike Museum, and then we would figure out where to put the 4th locker. What we're proposing in terms of funding is, again, it's a $20,000 grant. And in this report, we talked about $10,000 in Measure I funds from the CIP, sidewalk replacement. I think one of the council members indicated perhaps it'd be better to come from another source so we can maintain that funding. And so if it wanted to come from departmental savings, which we'll go over in the mid-year report, I think that'd be a fine source for that funding, because the matching fund requirement for installation is $13,000. It'll cost us $8,000 to install and another $5,000 or so to put in the required concrete pads. And so with that, that concludes the staff report.
Questions from the council members?
Since I was the one who yanked this thing, I was the council member who discussed this with Garrett. I don't have a problem with e-lockers. Seems like a swell idea. What I am concerned about, and yes, the economy is getting better, but here in Fairfax economics land, it's never a completely sunny day. We have to watch every penny, and the thought of expending $13,000 at a time when there are so many competing needs, whether it's programs for seniors and kids. One could go on forever thinking of all the needs that are unmet. I have a problem with this. I think that the bicycle community, if they think this is important, they should step up and pay for this. That way, they're the beneficiaries of it. They would have skin in the game, as they say. And this project, which I think is worthy, would come to fruition. So I'm very concerned, however, about the fact that we chase the grant. We get the grant, and now the grant requires us to reach into our own pockets to a very significant degree, I think, at $13,000. So those are my concerns as we begin this conversation.
Okay, other council members? Renee?
I actually just have a question of clarification. So this grant, I guess I wasn't listening when this grant came up. I'm wondering what other purposes this could have been used for. Was this a grant that was just available for e-lockers?
It's a grant specifically just for e-lockers. And so in essence, they'll fund the e-locker, but they won't fund the installation. So it's only a grant offered for e-lockers, just similar to the bicycle rack voucher program they offer only for bicycle racks. So it's very specific. The concept behind the program is that someone would store their bike there and then take the bus or the shuttle to wherever they're going to commute and work. I think additional benefit for us would be on the weekends. It'd be handy to keep some of the bikes off the sidewalks and if the racks are too crowded, and have someone stored in the locker long term.
Mayor?
John?
Yeah, I mean, I think also one of the things, I mean, that's in the general plan, and I think it's an idea that we've heard come up at the chamber too, is there's, I mean, we've got the bike rack pilot program, which may well be in the wrong place or whatever, but basically talking to some of the people like, well, okay, how come your bike is here leaning against the glass, or you brought it into the store or whatever it is, instead of using the bike rack, very often it's like, oh, well, this is a really valuable bike and I don't want to, it scratched or it disappeared because it's worth several $1,000s and stuff like that. And I think that these lockers are really designed to contain it completely, and then they swipe their card and they know it's locked up and nobody's going to swipe their bike, and then they can spend some money in businesses and things like this. So, it's for that reason, it's something that the chamber has, supported repeatedly, at least in conversation in the past. Yeah, I mean, in a way, yeah, I'll let them buy it, but that was just a comment.
Peter, did you want to speak?
A few questions. The way these work is that you would swipe your card, it would open up the locker, and would there be 4 bikes sharing a locker? Two bikes sharing a locker?
Yeah, actually it's one locker, it holds 2 bikes, but there's the divider that separates the bikes. So the bikes are secured in their own locked location.
So the 2 people, would have access to each other's bikes at the same time?
No, actually, your swipe card only allows you to access your bike.
Oh, okay. And my reading of this is that it's only a few pennies an hour, and that none of that money comes back to Fairfax, correct?
That's correct. The separate vendor is the one that handles the entire system. So if someone needs to add money to their card, get a card, or they have problems, they call up the vendor, they take care of it, and that's how the program works.
Yeah, I'm just a suggestion. It seems like it would probably work better if they charge a little bit more, just in terms of keeping people from leaving their bikes there, indefinitely. And then,
well, Peter, we can charge as much as we want.
Can we?
Actually, yeah, we just.
Do we have that discretion?
We do have discretion.
No, actually, this vendor, it's something they handle themselves. I think part of the deal with the grant is I believe you only had 2 vendors to choose from. And the idea is this card system would then allow them to use it other places. But it's a whole separate thing. They handle all that. We really don't have any say regarding that.
Really? Because it said like either 3 cents or 5 cents, and then I have to go
That's
back.
That's how they determine it. Also, additionally, just to interrupt, is if you read through all these materials, it specifically says something about you can't leave a bike in there indefinitely. It starts really racking up the cost. It doesn't go to the 3 to 5 cents. So it's not a permanent bike locker for you. There's sort of a limit on that.
Well, actually, when I read that, it seemed like the overage fee was not enough to really deter people.
Well, I think the issue is more about whether or not we want to do this. But as far as the company itself handles it, it seems pretty complicated to me. I don't think we would want to be in that business. I have just a quick question about the fourth one. Have we talked, I think the parkade, let's say we go forward on this, I think the parkade is really not an option. Part of what we want to do is redo the parkade, and we have grant money to do so. So I don't think we should be taking up a parking space with some large bike locker. Have we talked to Farah and Salm at all? They have a lot of people parking their cars there. Maybe they would feel more amenable to a bike locker in their area, which might also have a sign on it saying, you want another bike locker, go to the bike museum.
We actually have had discussions with them regarding, but we didn't necessarily identify a location, but we conceptually talked about it.
Yeah, I think that because so many bikers are using that lot illegally, it may be that they might like the idea of having a bike locker there that, they agree, they give up one space, and even though they're not making money, it just sort of supports that. And then people would know that the other bike lockers are at the mountain bike museum, something like that. So, Renee, you had another comment?
Yeah, no, I do have concerns, and I read it over and over, trying to figure out, is this really the best match? Now, given that we have a grant, I hear you, David, this is not a great predicament to be in, and that there's money for this. Bike lockers are desperately needed in places. I just got a call from a task force member of Safe Routes to Schools in Tiburon, and she said, what we need is bike lockers at the bottom of these hills so the kids can be dropped off and then picked up at the bottom of the hill and then not have to drive to school and not fill the city streets with cars. But here we're going to have these bike lockers, and we're saying, hey, park your bike over at the mountain bike museum and then walk across over and get some lunch and then go back, and they got to get the card system going for that. It doesn't seem like the best match for what we are trying to do here. I think what we need, I'm just going to throw this out there, is covered bike parking, which would be simple, and we could put lots more bikes and have it covered because people want to deal with sunshade, and it's much more suited to our bike and pedestrian kind of way of life here and what we're trying to get people to do in taking their local trips by bike. So here we have the money, but I have to say that it wouldn't be my first choice of something to spend our matching funds to do.
I guess I would disagree from the perspective that we have so many people biking through this town that have very expensive bikes. And I agree with John that, we've got folks that are setting their bikes up against some business's glass because they want to watch it. If they could put it in a secure bike locker, maybe they would feel better about it, and they would spend money versus this cup of coffee at the roastery and blocking the sidewalk for disabled people. So I realize it is funding, and I think the reality is there are people like you who commute all the time, and that's really laudable, but Fairfax is a place that people continue to come by on these really fancy bikes, including me. And, I can't leave my bike anywhere unless it's my commuter bike. So I feel strongly that we should seriously consider it. I realize that it's a big match. It would be nice of the Air District to pay for the installation as well, or at least pay for part of it. But basically, they're asking for more than 50% match. One question I had, which was just a basic question, I noticed that these guys have quad bike lockers. do those take up even more space, or what's the situation there?
I think what we've identified is we're using the pie-shaped lockers to maximize the space, and so the 3 lockers kind of fit like
So
pies.
it's better?
It worked out better for our configuration.
Okay, and the other thing I want to remind people is that we also got something like 30 bike racks. These are not like the one in front of the coffee roastery, that we already have 5 installed through grants from the Bay Area. So we will have, it won't be covered, but we will have more formal bike racks around town. And I know you go to San Anselmo, there's no bike racks, there's 1 or 2. So we will have more of those as well. So I guess.
I'm sorry, Barbara, where was what money paid for the other bike racks, the 30 racks?
Bay Area money.
It's a Bay Rack. It's a Bay Area Air Quality District bike rack
So that's
voucher
where
program.
we got the 30 others, and I'm hoping on subsequent reports we hear about their installation. But because that will also, some people with expensive bikes might be willing to lock them up there because it'll be more secure. So with that, let's open it up to public comment. I think John's been wanting to speak on this matter.
Actually, I had one more
Okay,
comment.
one more comment.
You know, if we're looking at citing this at, say, the Bike Museum, one way to sort of bridge the gap on the funding is perhaps to ask them to pay for the cement pad, because, you know, if we're building this on someone else's property, it seems like the property owner might be reasonable for them to pay for the cement pad. That would reduce our costs somewhat, and then because the bike rack's not, you know, may not be there permanently, and then they'll have the pad at the end. So I would suggest possibly that would be one way to reduce our commitment and costs. And you know, if the owners of the property at the Bike Museum or even Fair Anselm think this is a good idea, they may be willing to contribute that cost.
Condition of approval?
I'm putting it out there as a possibility. I'm not, you know.
I think right now we're not in the voting mode. But I also want to say one thing is we need to look at Peter's mic because it's buzzing. So the sound system is great, but there's a little buzzing problem. Thank you.
So Peter, just to sort of riff on your idea, if you just break this up into chunks, there's 3,000 and 8,000. I can see voting for approval if we can get other people to pay for the money and maybe just a smidge of money from the town, as opposed to the whole 13,000 or even a large part of it. What if the Bike Museum was able to cover the 3,000? What if the Chamber of Commerce, after all, it is their members that will benefit from the folks spending money in town, you know, kicked in X? What if you began to get a series of stakeholders to actually kick in reasonable sums of money, and that way reach the $13,000 and perhaps zero out the town or make our contribution rather a little more modest?
Well, sure, that'd be great. I think if we can, you know, I don't know that we're going to be able to get all these people to contribute. Logically, it would make some sense, though, if we're building this improvement on, say, the Bike Museum property, they're benefiting from it, especially for the Bike Museum. They may see the wisdom of contributing, and I think that's something that we could look at in terms of reducing the town's costs on that. So.
In other words, why not approach? I can't riff off the top of my head all the bicycle organizations, but why wouldn't, you know, it's for their members and their supporters. So why shouldn't they be approached? Why shouldn't the chamber be approached to some degree and put together a package? Let me put this another way. It is true that what Garrett said is that we can, you know, we can play with where the money comes from, but I was particularly struck by the fact that he identified, for what it's worth, the sidewalk and tree thing. As we all know from walking the sidewalks, and I must say maybe I'm a little more sensitive to it as I was watching my dad walk today. For you and I, the fact that the trees are uplifting the cement, the fact that it doesn't seem on Sir Francis Drake on the, let's say, the the gas station side, the Indian restaurant side. Maybe, for you and I, we can walk up and down that street. Now I look at it as what it is. It's a minefield for our seniors. And they're stopping from coming downtown because it is treacherous for them. So if you want to talk about economics and economic engines, what I see here is, think of who is not going to get the money if somebody does get the money. And to me, our senior population is as valuable as our biking community. And I see that there's just so much bucks to go around. And to me, the beneficiaries of something should pay for it. And the town should not be called upon, and I just can't figure for the life of me why it is being called upon to cover the whole nut here.
Thank you, David. Let's open it up for public comment. John, did you want to speak on this matter?
Yes, John Sargent, Fairfax. I was just a little confused by the cost to the town. Do I understand, per the staff report, it would be $13,000 period, no additional money?
Yes, the staff report indicates it'd be $13,000 to have them installed. That's a rough estimate for a concrete pad. It could be less.
But this is for 4, but we have to provide 4. Or am I reading that wrong?
Not that I'm going back in dialogue here, but no, it's for 4 e-lockers total. That's 4 lockers installed would cost $13,000. The 4 lockers cost $20,000. That's being covered by the cost of the grant. The 4 lockers can accommodate a total of 8 bicycles.
Okay. Thank you. I really like David's idea of having bike riders take some responsibility for funding these kind of things. They ride on the roads that are paid for by automobile taxes for gasoline and whatever. We bend over backwards for these people, including the recent thing with the San Rafael Richmond Bridge of millions of dollars to provide bike right away where it will be very, very lightly used. My primary objection to this, however, is something else, and that is, when Proposition I was sold to the voters, I got a call from David as mayor saying it was just essential to keep the town running in an efficient way, and it was important to pass that to keep the town fully staffed and whatever. I got a call from the police chief saying he needed the money to keep his excellent police force fully staffed and operational. I realize the language of Prop I gives you the discretion to do most anything you want. I think using Prop I money to do this is a real insult to the voters who voted for it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, John. Anybody else from the public want to speak on this matter? Mark?
Mark Bell, 63 Dominga. I don't really have strong feelings about it. I don't own an $8,000 bike. But if I did, I'd want to be able to lock it up. I think the bike museum is a good alternative. Like Renee's saying, it's kind of out of the way. It kind of reminds me of when I used to live in Southern California, when people would drive the half mile to the beach so that they could go jogging. Like you would figure that if people are riding their bikes, they have enough energy to cross the street. And so I think that the bike museum itself would be a good locale. I do agree with David. It sure seems like a lot of money for 8 bikes. And, if we're looking at some type of payback somewhere, it's always hard to quantify, well, these people are going to be spending $5 on a coffee or $7 on a sandwich. So it's just hard to quantify $13,000 and how that's making itself, how it's going to make its way back into the community. So I don't really have, like I said, any strong feelings on it, but those are things to consider. Thanks.
Thank you, Mark. Other folks want to speak on this matter? Okay, with that, I'll bring it back to the council. John, could you Shut that off. Thank you. Thank you. So I would just, before we get into this, I know there was some discussion about trying to get people to chip in, and well, I think that's a good idea. I think we would turn this into a fundraising project, which is a lot of work for staff. And so I don't think it's a bad idea to ask some folks to chip in, but if we turn this into a fundraising project, then I think we'd be better off just not accepting the bike lockers and moving on. So I'll just throw that out there, but I'll bring it back. John, you wanted to speak?
Sure. I wanted to address a couple of things brought up by Mr. Sargent here. In terms of gas taxes, paying for roads and things like that, they actually pay for a small percentage of roads, and that's one of the difficulties that transportation in general is looking at, is that gas taxes pay a smaller and smaller proportion of the costs of roads. I mean, most of the infrastructure that we have here is not paid, the majority is paid by, not paid by gas taxes. The majority is actually paid by taxes that don't come from the gas pump. They come from all of us paying taxes to the state. So that's one thing. I mean, I also agree that, you know, there's some sticker shock involved here, and I'm, you know, I mean, I don't have the kind of a bike that needs to live in a, you know, one of these expensive lockers, but, you know, I try to see how cheap I can live and have other priorities in life. And I also agree that if we turn it into a fundraising thing with a bunch of things, that takes time. I mean, my main concern with that is not that, you know, it takes effort. Of course, it does take effort, but some of that effort can be educational and say, okay, you are benefiting from this. You know, for instance, going to different businesses in the chamber, and you know, it's in a way that's consciousness raising, to let them know that yes, their businesses have costs that are borne by the community. I mean, the community pays for the upkeep of the parkade and all the parking on the street, and you know, the maintenance of everything else, and that is part of the cost of what it takes to run a town. That's what it costs to have people come and, you know, buy in a business. I mean, it's actually not free. It's just somebody else is paying for it. And frankly, that's one of the functions of government, is to facilitate paying for things that everybody benefits from. And you can say, well, you know, I'm not sure how many people are going to benefit from these bike lockers. And of course, that's one of the questions coming up in my mind too. But there's businesses that'll benefit from it. There's people who want to, you know, have forgotten their bike lock and need to take the bus or something like that, or you know, have an expensive bike and they want to go out to dinner or whatever it is. We don't know all the different things that will benefit from it, but it's in general it's an infrastructure thing. It's like the Creek Bridge that, you know, we're getting millions of dollars from the feds and some from the state too, I believe, to do a seismic retrofit. I mean, yeah, the money's coming from somewhere, and yes, we as a town are facilitating that happening. When we, you know, this is a fairly steep match because, you know, frankly, seems like a lot of money to, you know, pay $5,000 to pour some concrete, and it could be that the bike museum is saying, well, you know, I bet you we could pour that concrete for less, and since it's actually they're leasing that property. They may find out a way for doing that for less. I mean, basically, that's how that works. So I'm not against asking other people that would benefit to share in the cost of this. But I think if we try to figure that all out tonight, what we're trying to figure out is whether this is a good idea for our town, and go forward from there.
Can I speak? I feel as though we need to do a little more homework, and the cost-benefit piece is unclear. I know the situation with the Mountain Bike Museum, and they are barely going to make it to open. So going to them to say, hey, you know, we went and said, hey, could we use the space for the bike lockers? I'm not quite sure they're going to see that as top priority. Fair Anselm, I think, would be an excellent possibility to approach them, because absolutely they need to develop their bike infrastructure down there. Really, covered bike parking is critical. If you want people to take their food on their bike, they got to be able to keep their bike in the shade. Simple, much cheaper. So I'm concerned about, is this really a good thing for us to do in terms of the cost involved and how much and how many will benefit from having this? It's a great thing, but I'm not sure it's the best use of our money. I don't feel comfortable voting on it right now until we know if anyone else really thinks it is either.
So maybe one of the things we should consider is continuing this till we do a little more work on this. As far as potentially, I don't think the chamber is going to be really interested given their sign project, but we could certainly ask them. There are some things that we could do, so maybe rather than trying, there's just too many questions at this point, and for us to go forward right now, I think there's too many questions. We'd leave it unanswered. And if we decide to say no, maybe we regret it in the future. So maybe it's worthwhile taking a little more look at this, and maybe when we meet with the chamber, we can discuss it with them as well. Go ahead, Garrett.
So a question. I understand continuing item, that's not a problem. But I am interested in the follow-up. So it's a thought pattern, talk to the museum, talk to Fair Anselm, talk to the chamber, and see if they're willing to share in any costs or have any suggestions. And then if that doesn't work, then I'm just wondering, am I supposed to do any additional analysis when we were talking about cost benefit? I'm not too sure what the council's really looking for.
I don't think, my personal opinion is I think what you just stated is all we would do. And if it comes out that we come up with nothing, then we can bring it back and vote yes or no on it.
That's fine. Actually, I should clarify the cost.
Thank you.
The cost is only $5,000 for the concrete pads. That's one for one locker and one for the 3 lockers. So if you only did the 3, you went the other one, that wouldn't be the cost. The $8,000 is a fixed cost. It's a little less than that, but that's the cost for the vendor to deliver, install it on the concrete pad. And so that's a fixed cost. That cost will not change. The concrete pad could slide, but whether it's $4,000 or $5,000, you're really only talking a window of 1,000, unless volunteers were to do it and material was donated.
I suspect that the concrete pad is one thing, but the installer, there's no change in that. Okay, so why don't we check in with the slab, the concrete folks, check in with Fair Anselm, the chamber. We meet with them Monday anyway, and yeah, I just don't want to start a project that we don't have the staff to take on.
Just gauge the interest, and if we get 0, like Barbara said, then we need to choose to move on, potentially. And if we get some interest, then we still need to then decide how to direct you further, whether it's worth the time it will take.
And so I think
do we have a deadline on this?
There is a deadline, but we have time. So coming back to you in April is fine. We'll do that.
Sounds good.
Need a motion to continue this, or is that just where we go?
Yeah, I think you're continuing it.
Okay, thank you. So we will move on to item number 10. Thank you.
Madam Mayor,
yes.
If someone's here for another item, we could slide the mid-year budget.
Oh, yeah. Let me ask, is anyone here to speak on one of the other items? Yes. Which item is that? Item 11. Okay, so why don't we do that item first? And I think Mark Bell is here for item 11, too. He's raising his hand in the back. Okay, so with that, do you want to briefly do the staff report, and then Garrett and I can add to it?
Okay, sure. So the item before you really is a discussion consideration of the Bay Area Air Quality Management District's model ordinance regarding wood burning. devices and kind of direct staff as appropriate. So you're not approving any ordinances or introducing anything tonight. Right now, all you're doing is discussing if you want to consider changes to the existing town ordinance, because there's a town ordinance that governs wood-burning devices. And to the staff report, we attach the town ordinance, we attach the model ordinance prepared by the Air District, and then something that's called a reference guide. The reference guide actually lays out 14 options that towns can consider. Our town ordinance actually addresses what they refer to as options 10 and 11. And so specifically, option 10 is our town code requires non-EPA compliant devices to remove, replace, or render inoperable if a remodel exceeds 50% of the excess value. Option 11 on their list, but also in our town code, is that we make the use of non-EPA compliant devices unlawful after July 1st, 2010, and require that they be removed or rendered inoperable. And there are some exceptions, such as a wood-burning device appliance specifically designed for cooking outdoors. So there's some exceptions. Our quick review of the different options, and obviously the council can choose to do whatever, is that a couple of the options, there's probably no impact to staff. I think most of the other options have to various levels of either increasing our administration, our enforcement, monitoring, or all of the above. And that's just something to keep in mind, and we can provide more details as you go through it. But that's basically our staff report. Mayor Kohler may want to add things. She asked this item be put on the agenda, and then there's also the video, although since we don't have audio, I don't know if the video would be very good.
I think we should have the video for the people that are here, because it's only 3 minutes. But I asked for this to be on the agenda because we got an interest by a community member regarding his neighbor who burns a lot and was really smoking him out. And maybe that was you that's nodding. And at that time suggested that we include something like the Berkeley has in their ordinance, which is it creates a private nuisance action. So where a neighbor has a problem with another neighbor, what they did is they put an action where a neighbor can take another neighbor to court. There's mediation and such required. And when I was at the Air District, we started this process of updating our model ordinance, which was quite old and before the rule was adopted. And we started out with that provision being in and decided that it was best to kind of offer lots of options. There were lots of things that had been thrown out through implementing Regulation 6, Rule 3, and we thought we can offer them, and any city that wants to look at this, they could have a menu, they could pick what worked for them or not do it at all. And so that's the way it's done. Additionally, when I went to the Air District, I always thought wood smoke, I didn't like it, but I never thought there was anything wrong with it. It was natural. And I learned a lot about health effects. So I would like, there's a medical doctor from Utah, Physicians for Responsibility, and it's a quick video that talks about the health effects of wood smoke, because most people really don't realize how serious it is for you. So I thought we could just have that. Unfortunately, we're not live, but maybe we can do a link to it off our website or something like that. And Michelle's nodding yes. So it's a quick one, and for those of you who can't see, you can hear it, or you can move around.
There may be a button to turn on the closed caption thing, so that if somebody is only able to see it online, they could read the words.
So thanks, Garrett, for doing the technical. Appreciate that. So I guess I'll just bring it back to the council. I just want to add one thing. Some of you read in the paper, I think it was a couple days ago, the number of wood smoke complaints that the Air District received in Marin County. And of course, Marin County's been the highest since the rule started. There were 865, and I called some of my colleagues yesterday at the Air District to ask how many we'd gotten in Fairfax. 54 of those complaints were in Fairfax, so that was 6.2% of all of Marin County. It's actually kind of a lot. And when I was at the Air District, we didn't get that many in Fairfax. Most of the complaints come in from West Marin and Novato. But let's bring it back to the council to discuss this. Actually, I just really wanted us to have this conversation. I'm not sure that our wood smoke ordinance is actually quite good. And the Air District is in the process of revising their rule, which will probably be another year or so before it's finalized. So it might not be a good time to even consider any changes to ours, but ours is quite good, and it doesn't take a lot of staff time. So with that, I'll open up to the council. John?
Okay. Yeah, this is very informative, and wood smoke is definitely not, a lot of us have a warm feeling in our heart for going camping and stuff like that. And, our wood stove, our wood smoke ordinance in Fairfax tries to address that, the health problems, but it also tries to recognize that some people have wood heat as their only option. And so it's kind of written around that and trying to make it real. But what I'm really, I read through all of this, and I've read through a lot of other materials, and of course our ordinances. And what I was struck by is there's nothing in any of this material that tells people how to build a fire that doesn't spew out tons of smoke. I mean, I have heated in my life quite a bit with wood. Have a fireplace in my house, which I haven't burned wood in for a couple of years just to spare the air day on every time that you kind of want a fire. But I in recognizing the wood smoke problem, I started looking at, well, what types of wood? You got to make sure your wood is dry. There's a lot of species of wood that is really bad to burn. Fir and pine are they gum up your chimney and cause chimney fires a lot of times, but they also cause a lot of smoke. And basically what the smoke is unburned wood. Basically it gets up to about 350 degrees Fahrenheit. It burns, you see the flames, and a lot of unburned flammable material which is what the smoke is, goes up the chimney and it cools down and it goes out into the air, and then, it goes all over the place. There are some very efficient wood heaters that have been developed in Northern Europe, where the firebox burns it at the 350 Fahrenheit region, and then it gets mixed in with more oxygen, burns a second time at 1800 Fahrenheit. That's all soaked into the masonry, the bricks around that second firebox, if you will, and radiates out into the house. By the time it goes out of the chimney, it's down to about 250 Fahrenheit. And it's really pretty clean because those particulates have been burned. Those carbons have been burned up and converted into heat that then heats the house. And catalytic converters on the modern wood stoves are an attempt to chemically do that. But you can also do that in your own wood stove to an extent. You can burn wood, for instance, poplar, if it's dry, it lights really fast. In about 2 minutes, there's no smoke coming out at all in terms of what you can see. It burns hot and cleanly, and it burns relatively rapidly compared to something like oak. But people load their wood stove with oak and then damp it down so it'll burn all night, and it basically sits there and smolders all night at a low temperature and just puts out pound after pound of the smoke that we just saw in the video. It's pretty offensive, and it stinks. Yes, it's easy for the person running the wood stove, but it's bad for everybody else. So this is the conundrum. the solution that I did in my house was I got something that's less sustainable than wood. What it is a kerosene heater from Fairfax Lumber, and I stuck it in the fireplace. So that basically kerosene heaters, they burn a non-renewable fuel, which is kerosene. It's made at the same place that makes the gas that comes out of the pump. But and that fuel is also available at Fairfax Lumber. But what it does is it stinks when you first light it and the stove is heating up. Then once it's running, you can put that in the middle of the room. You can't tell it's burning. It's just putting out heat, and it's very efficient at basically converting that fuel into heat. Then when you turn it off, it's cooling down and it stinks again. So you put it back in the fireplace and the stink goes up this chimney. So it's better than wood smoke. It puts out heat. I was faced with the problem that half of the daytime living space in my house in the wintertime was unusable because it was 50 degrees in there. So basically hang out in the kitchen or, not, or freeze to death. So basically this kerosene heater solved that problem, and it could be that many people in Fairfax can solve it in this way and help their neighbors at the same time and not just rely on the provision here for people who heat only with wood. There are other options there that help your neighbors better. So I just, informatively, it wouldn't be that much maybe to have that kind of information available to the public in the same way that we have floodgates designs available in town hall as a public service might help our neighbors and be minimal expense.
Burnwise, EPA Burnwise site has some information on how to burn more efficiently and more appropriately. But okay, Renee, you wanted to talk?
I just have a really quick, more technical question. So we have number 10 and number 11 in the options that are in our code already. So, but I'm not quite sure I understand how, doesn't the making the non-compliant devices unlawful after a certain date completely supersede the whole upon remodel condition? I mean, once you've made something unlawful, then it doesn't matter if you remodel your house or not, the thing's gone, right? I'm sorry, I'm just trying to figure out what since we only have those two provisions. Yeah, I'm looking at the discussion.
So the ordinance does make, after July 10th, makes it any non-compliant one should be removed or rendered inoperable. Building official could grant an exception in case of hardship. But this also, we're not going into everybody's house and saying remove something.
There's also one thing. This ordinance was passed in 2007. So I think it was 2007. Frank, were you on the council at that point? No. Yeah, so 2007. And so I think what it may have contemplated, Renee, was that up until 2010, where the 50% remodel came in, you would yank it. But yes, we're not going into everyone's homes, and I'm not really sure that option is really being enforced, but to the extent that we don't want to be so heavy-handed about it.
Sure.
Can I make a point? I believe there's a list of exemptions. Did you see those in our code? Okay.
I have a lot of respiratory problems that the wood smoke, I can step outside my door instantly and tell you if it's a spare the air day, because my lungs are sort of the canary in the coal mine, and especially where I live in Cascade Canyon. And one day I came home, I saw my neighbor burning a fire, and the smoke literally went like this into my backyard because of the atmospheric conditions that we have in our canyons. We get these inversion layers that are super, super low, so the smoke definitely gets trapped, and it's visceral at times. There's a very lively debate on the Fairfax Hills sort of user group about this, and most of the comments were in favor of regulating wood smoke. It's a very emotional issue because people like their roaring hearth. I mean, look at our decorative fireplace right now. But it is a serious
It's a gas
health issue.
fireplace.
It's a gas fireplace, but still, the hearth, the fire, people are very reluctant to give that up, and but it's a very important health concern. I would like a little more technical information in terms of choosing what type of ordinance we want, and it's a cost-benefit thing or a detriment-benefit thing. I'm curious how much the EPA compliance stoves deal with these smoke issues. The video, I think he was just talking generally about unmitigated smoke, but I'd like a little more information. For example, if we're choosing are we going to ban all wood-burning devices, or do we want to just have EPA compliant devices? What's the benefit in terms of?
So there's a couple of things. One of the things to think about is this ordinance is a pick and choose.
Exactly.
Okay, and so one of the options is there for some entity or town who wanted to ban all wood-burning devices, and they felt that that's what they wanted to do. They might choose that.
Right.
I don't think.
I would want to know.
I don't think Fairfax is probably in that mode, but one thing to remember is even a compliant device still cannot burn on a winter spare the air alert. And that's because there's still particulates going into the air that it still causes problems, so on particularly bad days. But at this point, we're really just discussing the issue and we're not making any decisions.
Understood. And my comment is I'd like to know how much the EPA compliance stoves mitigate the issues and what kind of issues they do mitigate. Some general comments. I'm not so sure that a private legal cause of action is the best thing to put into our ordinance. As an attorney, that may seem counterintuitive. I mean, I love the work, but I think it's not the kind of litigation that we would want to necessarily foster, and I think that could create some problems. I think it's probably too difficult to do, but I think, legislating, against selling wood that's hasn't been cured would go a long way, because green wood is, as John mentioned, is very very much worse. I like the visible emissions limitation option, even though it would be a pain in the neck to enforce.
It's more than a pain in the neck. So it requires that you go to wood smoke school, and the first school it's very difficult to read smoke. You go to wood smoke school for a 40-hour course, and every 6 months you have to go back. And you have to read smoke at different levels of opacity. So that provision was put in because some community members were interested in it, but it's really not one I would ever advise, because we don't have that kind of expertise.
Right. Well, my comment was it would be good to sort of have, enforcement would be difficult, but I generally like the idea of, the wood, requiring wood stoves to be EPA certified upon real estate transfer. That's a burden that really is borne by people moving into Fairfax, because the seller would negotiate with the buyer on that issue. And I think, the idea here is to kind of phase these things out. The banning of outdoor fires may prove politically difficult. I don't know if, that people, again, they like to have their little, backyard fire once in a while. I don't know how big a problem that is in the overall scheme of things. I think, what's that?
I would flip that. The transfer will drive the realtors absolutely ballistic. The banning the outside thing, that would be easier. No, you can't do that. The one thing I would really like to know is, and I think you may have mentioned this up front, is if everybody complied with the spare the day requirements, let me ask you this, do you feel it? on a non-spare the air day in the winter, say today, would you find it to be detrimental to your health if folks were, if it was 40 degrees outside and people were firing up their wood stoves?
I don't have when I said that I personally am affected by this, I don't have any exact barometer of what's acceptable, what's not in terms of that. Obviously, spare the air days are the most critical days in terms of what is in front of us in terms of the different options. I'm just going through some of the ones and commenting on those. So those are kind of my takes on some of the options. It is a lot of kind of technical information that it would be good to know about these. For example, the pros and cons of, or the benefit of the EPA compliant stoves versus not having any. And then I guess the decision we want to make too is, do we as a town want to move towards phasing out wood burning stoves and fireplaces? That's where some of these options are going. And it's a lot of, excuse me, a lot of sort of technical information that we should be getting before we make a decision on this. But I generally would like to see better controls on wood burning, but it is complex, and there's going to be a lot of concerns either way when you try. Again, the idea of limiting people's ability to burn fires in their homes, it's an emotional issue.
Let me suggest a few things, because I was here in 2007 when I guess then Councilmember Sue Bramborg brought this forward. And it was sort of at the time that I think that the state regulators were bringing forward some stuff. We might have actually been a little earlier than them. So
it's not the state, it's the Bay Area.
Backward.
And that rule came into effect January 1st, 2009.
Yeah, so we were a little before that.
And there was a model ordinance that I think you guys used, yeah.
Okay. To me, Peter, it seems that there's a lot, when I look at this list, it's a lot of work to get people to do what they're ethically mandated to do. And so it seems to me that, and this is why I asked the question of you, which is if we get to the 100% compliance on these winter spare the air days, would that do it? Because I'm sorry, I just don't know anybody with health concerns in this area, so I'm intrigued to know where it is on the parameters and stuff. Is the state doing such a good job that when they, call a day, that those are the days? And if it's not one of those days, then, probably it's a pretty okay day. Maybe not a perfect day, but an all right day. And I would say it's not enough for Fairfaxians to have some 60 or 70 or 80 people who are violating this, and a few more who aren't even being caught. They have to be called to account and to understand that they have a community responsibility here. And that it is not, I don't care if folks are coming over to, have a hearth-filled holiday season thing. That's of no concern to me. You have to look to your neighbors, whether you know them or not in a small town, and you can't take actions that are deleterious to their health and happiness. That's the deal that we make with one another living in a small town. So I would say I would be interested to know, how do we up the enforcement against folks who don't see the wisdom of my prior statement, and how do we get to 100% compliance here? I think a lot of it is a little bit of ignorance. Not everybody, picks it up on television the night before, or gets the back-mid alerts on email. But I do think generally my sense of Fairfaxians is that once made to understand the impact of their actions and how a small tinkering of their behavior will result in a benefit for their neighbors throughout town, we'll take that action. So I look at these and I'm struggling, because I want to take most of the ones from this suite of excellent ideas, but I can't get past number one, because I think number one, if fully enforced and fully understood, will get us to where we want.
Can you read number one?
Yeah, that's the winter spare the air alert. It prohibits wood burning when the air district calls it an alert.
Well,
we do.
Okay, so what it does is this, is that right now, Fairfax cannot enforce that. And so if you wanted to pick number one, what that gives is that only the air district can enforce that provision. So if Fairfax was a town who wanted to really do extra enforcement, not that we have a lot of people to do that, you might adopt this. So if people were burning on a winter spare the air alert, then in essence, Mark could issue a citation. And just to answer your question, David, a friend of mine who's actually the chief of public information at the Air District has asthma, and all during the winter with people burning, winter spare the air or not, she's constantly with the inhaler and huffing. So, it depends on people's physical health, depends on their age. For some people, any wood burning, even if it's with a compliant device and people don't damper down, still is a problem for them. So, but for the vast majority of people, the winter spare the air alerts help. So that's that. And I think we should open it up to public comment, because I think Mark has been waiting for a long time, as has...
I have. Mark Bell, 63 Dominga. The last time when we passed that ordinance, it cost us over $3,000 because we got rid of the stove that we had, put in an EPA-rated stove that was among the best performers, emits less than 4 grams per hour. You can't even clean the chimney or the stovepipe anymore because there's nothing in it even after 2 or 3 years of burning dried, seasoned wood. If you read further into the article about the complaints, there were 21 infractions where people received a legal action against them in Marin County, even though there were, I think, 600 or 700 calls. Years ago, when they first started doing this, there was a woman in Woodacre who called on her neighbor like 250 times, which of course skews the number as to how many complaints there are. The other thing that's lacking is a lack of rebates to either get an EPA-rated stove or to switch to something else. People say gas is better, electric's better. You can talk to the people in San Bruno to see what they think about natural gas heating, since their neighborhoods went up in flames. The other thing is that it costs me over $100 a month more to heat my house to 66 degrees during the winter because of spare the air days. When I called up Bay Area Air Quality Management, I said, so who else is being punished like this on a spare the air day? He said, what do you mean? I said, well, let's look at the Chevron refinery 24/7. I wish this doctor would go over there and do an analysis of the pollution that comes out of that plant. He said to me, oh, they have very strict guidelines on the refinery over there, which is obviously a lie, because otherwise they wouldn't have spent $3 million trying to buy the town council election this past November. Additionally, I was in Vienna passing by a diesel plant just outside the airport, rolled down the window, you don't smell anything, even right next to it. There's no smell, which tells you that it can be done and it's not being done. So what we're looking at as far as, spare the air days, et cetera, is really the only people who are being punished for this in any way are people who have EPA-rated stoves, which we were led to believe would be okay to burn seasoned wood. The other problem you have with wood burning is that people who do construction burn construction wood in fireplaces or whatever wood stove they have, which is really where you get massive amounts of pollution. So anyway, I'm sure my 3 minutes is long up. I have more. That's what I have to say for this evening. Thank you.
Wait a minute, don't go so far. Are you telling me that you heat your house with that EPA certified?
We have a gas furnace. When I get tired of being at 64 or 66 degrees in winter, I light up the wood stove. The wood stove's the EPA-rated stove. It puts out 4 grams or less of particulate matter per hour of burning. It's set into a fireplace, so there's all this brick masonry around it, which gets heated, which means that also transfers the heat into the room and into the house. So if I get tired of freezing, then I can get the heat up in the house another 4 or 5 degrees, and it doesn't cost me an additional $150 to $200 a month, where it cost me over an extra $100 a month to get it at 66 degrees, which is what happened last winter. Don't know about you, but I don't like giving PG&E any money, let alone an extra $100.
Thank you, Mark. Okay, next speaker, and would you say your name and where you live, please?
Sure. My name's Kyle Williams, and I live at 36 Roca Drive. You can see it from the movie theater. And I really appreciate the council taking this matter seriously. Like you said, I'm literally being smoked out by a neighbor, me and my girlfriend. And it's horrible because, like that video said, the smoke gets into our house even though our windows are shut. And it's just, I've dealt with like severe sore throat, allergies, red eyes, and I actually work from home with my company. And from the research I've done, I have absolutely no recourse under the Bay Area Quality Management District or the City of Fairfax. My only recourse at this point is to file a civil suit against this person and take it to court. And so what I'm asking the town council to consider is they have this in the city of Berkeley. It's called a wood smoke nuisance ordinance. And it basically says if you are impacted by a neighbor who's burning wood smoke, that they have a process to mediate that. They have a process to go through with the neighbor to try to mediate that. I've already actually spoke with my neighbor. He won't stop burning. He says that he doesn't have the money to use his electricity. And so I think there's multiple issues that were raised as people were speaking. I'm not trying to make this a legal thing. I'm trying to just have a process that I can go to my neighbor, deliver him a letter saying, can we please mediate this? And if he refuses to, I'm supported some way by the town to do that. I live in Fairfax because I love the clean, fresh air. And the problem with the Spare the Air days is the Spare the Air day period goes from like late November to actually the end of February. And over the past, those months, we've had like 20 or 21 Spare the Air days. So that's great. He doesn't burn on a Spare the Air day, but the other days he burns and I'm impacted. And he will also burn all the way till June or July because he just likes to have a warm place. And there's nobody who's regulating that, not the Bay Area Quality Management District, not the town council. So I'd like there to be something where it's like unreasonable wood burning that's impacting neighbors. And, the last thing I would say is I believe he's using a non-EPA certified wood stove. And I'd like to know, how is that resolved? I've kind of been bounced around. I reported this to the police department. They sent me to the Ross Valley Fire District, and now I've been sent to Mark Lockaby, the building manager. So is that the person who I need to follow up with to have it investigated as to whether this person's using a non-EPA certified wood stove?
Yeah, so Mark Lockaby is our code enforcement guy as well. He wears a few hats. And so as far as this ordinance, he's very familiar with it. And so, Garrett, we should talk to Mark to make sure that he's willing to go into this man's house, because the way our ordinance reads, he may not be exempt. But the other thing I was thinking of is, so we put when I worked at the Air District, we put the Berkeley provision in there, which includes dispute resolution mediation. But the way it works in Berkeley is they're not involved. They don't get involved. This is really a private cause of action, and they don't set up the mediation, nothing of that effect. And so I would say there's a couple of options which may work better for you. It sounds like you've got the kind of neighbor that when I worked at the Air District, we would get complaints about those kind of folks who just love to burn. And it's possible he's also burning unseasoned wood and dampering down, which people like to do, and so it's smoldering even more. But one of the things I was wondering, Garrett, that conflict resolution group, the mediation group that came in for Deer Park Villa, I mean, one possibility is putting them in touch with Kyle to see if maybe he and his neighbor can discuss some mediation. Do you think that's a possibility that we could contact them and get Kyle's information and see if, there's not going to be any easy resolution here. This is a neighbor-on-neighbor problem, and they're hard to resolve. But maybe a mediation might be a way for him understanding what he's doing to you and impacting you versus just getting angry at you because he loves his fires. But I think we should also have Mark check out that house and see what he's using.
So just to be clear, Mark can't make anyone let him into the house, but he
Right.
can typically we would contact the owner and ask.
Ask if it's okay. And then if we could also maybe, what was that group called?
Sure, the council neutrals, we can get you their information, and we could share, if it's okay, we could share your information with them.
Sure, that's fine, but I guess I don't feel like I need to do mediation at this point.
Okay.
I'd actually like for him to get a non-EPA certified wood stove.
What does it cost?
They're anywhere from, I think you would want an EPA certified
Or
stove.
I'm sorry, an EPA certified wood stove.
What typically happens with the EPA certified stove, and I don't know what he's burning there, does he have a fireplace or is he?
It's a wood stove. I've actually been in the place. I waited for Comcast to show up for him.
Okay, well that's nice of you. So usually it can be anywhere from 5,000 up if you don't have the piping. So he probably has it, but it may need to be upgraded for an EPA wood stove. But the stoves themselves usually run around 4,000 or 5,000 these days.
Okay.
And there is no rebate program at this time with the Air District. There is a rebate program.
Was there a rebate program at one point? Because I've done some research and
That was years ago, and
Okay.
they ran out of money in about an hour.
Okay.
And they've never done one since. There is a rebate program that the county has for unincorporated areas, and I also worked on one for West Marin, which is a real problem. So, but that's unincorporated. So at this point, I think his willingness to purchase something like that might be limited. But maybe what we can do is let's take this stepwise. If you can talk to Mark about trying to see if he can go in and see what he has there, and just take it stepwise. And Garrett, can we make sure that we stay in touch with Kyle so we give him feedback?
Kyle?
It sounds like if he refuses to allow Mark into his home, there's really nothing that the town council or Fairfax can do at that point to enforce the ordinance. Is that correct, what I'm hearing?
Other than an inspection warrant.
Sure, or a nuisance. Well, we'd have to inspection warrant. I guess that'd be the only option.
So let's take this stepwise and see if Mark can go into his house.
Okay.
And see what's there.
And I just point out the other frustrating thing is that he's also burning trash and burning manufactured wood.
So
And-
let me just say a couple of things. The Air District, if he's burning trash, you can enter.
That's a violation.
That's a violation of that rule.
I've reported it through the online complaint system, but you're
And
not.
did you write burning trash?
Yes.
Wait a minute. If he's burning trash and other stuff, then we're in a 159 Willow situation again. There's one thing to be having the dispute about what you're talking about. which is very serious. But once you're moving past that into the stuff that knucklehead at 159 was burning, now we have a problem. Now we have a very serious problem.
I asked the Ross Valley Fire Department to check it out. They went and investigated it and said there was no sign of trash burning. I emailed them. I said, I don't know what the extent of your investigation was, but did you see the manufactured wood with nails in it on his wood pile in front of his house? And I have a video of that. So he's burning nails and burning manufactured wood. And so for me, I'm just at a point where I'm coming to you to find out what can be done. And if you can't do anything, I'm going to resort to a civil lawsuit because, I need to take care of my health and my girlfriend's health. And so I'm just coming to the town council to see if there's anything can be done. And I understand it's a complex matter and it's difficult to enforce. And so, I understand.
Just make one last point on this. The idea of getting some mediation assistance, I think, is a good one, particularly since this group seems to have breached a significant divide between parties in this town. If you have a good conversation, if you have a good relationship at all with your neighbor, and this issue of litigation comes up, I would say to both of you that between Peter, I think would agree with me, the cost of civil litigation in nuisance is going to far outstrip whatever it would cost to put in a much better stove. So if the two of you can have a meeting of the minds of sanity and can perhaps share the cost of this thing, then I think perhaps, again, we will have a way to find amity between the two parties. But I would tell you, again, as I think that Peter alluded to before, I'm an attorney as well, and I will confirm that the idiocy of civil litigation is really a blight on the face of American democracy. Anything you can do to stay clear of it and reach good health in the community, be a better path.
Garrett, let me just ask one thing. So if he's burning trash, that's illegal in accordance with our ordinance as well.
Yes, so how it works is you report it to the building official and code enforcement, and then we do what we can. But it is difficult because we have to see it. A pile of wood could be evidence, but it's just a pile of wood outside. I mean, it's hard to determine he's burning it, other than if he is burning it when we're there, then we can see it. So it all comes down to that. But we will start, see if we can make contact. Typically, most people are fairly cooperative to start with.
If I may, I mean, this is all the confrontational route, right? And if you enjoy a conversational relationship, at least with your neighbor, I would encourage you to go the did you know route, with burning composite wood products, plywood, the stuff that's half glue. This stuff is not meant to be burned. It's, it's illegal for a reason. And you say, well, didn't you bring up there may be a guide on how to burn correctly? It's kind of what I spoke to earlier, and it's just stuff I picked up along the way. But basically, there are ways to burn that don't gas out your neighbors. And basically, if you're burning, construction materials that are really designed to hold a building together and they're not designed to be burned, that's a whole different, it's apples and oranges. I mean, yes, it does kind of burn and kind of gives off heat to warm up your house, and if he likes to burn, yeah, he's injuring his neighbors, and you're not the only one. And if he doesn't really realize that, that may be a good, an opening there. I mean, presumably he's a human being that can react and approach you as another human being in a good way. And, sharing costs is one way. Obviously, if he is burning because he doesn't want to run electricity, he's not going to buy a $5,000 wood stove, but he may, spring for some seasoned wood that isn't going to gas out his neighbors. It's better to go out at it with honey instead of vinegar.
And so we're actually no longer in conversation together. My girlfriend and I had approached him and said it impacted our health. And he continued to burn to a point where on 70, 80-degree days where we had to keep our windows shut, and we would call him and ask him to stop burning, and he would not. And so, this is not a neighborhood thing to go, but on an 80-degree day, I said, this is ridiculous, and yelled at him.
Agreed.
And so, we're at a point where we're not talking, and, that's the situation, so.
What is
It's unfortunate, but I
this-
agree the situation
What is the
is
specific address
unreasonable.
of the neighbor?
Well, and I've also reported that I'd love for you guys to actually take a walk, and it's kind of ironic. You can actually see the wood smoke pouring out from downtown Fairfax. You can see this man's home. But it's 34 Roca, and if you actually go to his house, it's like a junkyard outside. It's got just tons of scrap wood. He's actually built other structures that I don't think have been permitted. And I've actually reported this to Mark Lockaby. And so basically I've reported that as well as a nuisance, that from my backyard I just see junk piles of wood. And I don't know if anything's going to be done about that
Okay,
either.
so why don't we do a little bit like we did 159 Willow? It sounds like there's a little more here than just the wood smoke problem. Let's have Mark really go out there, try to check on the wood stove, see what the rest of the house, the situation looks like. Does it look like what we saw at 159 Willow, and we had to start putting him on a schedule to start fixing things? Could we do that, Garrett? And can we report back?
Back in April?
Yeah.
Okay.
And also, let's make sure that Mark gets in touch with Kyle as well.
It was Williams, your last name?
Kyle Williams.
Kyle
yes.
Williams. If you could just provide your information to the town clerk, that'd be great.
Sure,
Email and
sure.
a phone number.
Sure, and I really appreciate this. I'm a certified public accountant and a financial advisor. I work from home from an investment management company. And like I said, I live in Fairfax, healthy lifestyle, go to Good Earth, and this has just been a huge situation in my life. And so that's why I'm here tonight. And so appreciate your time and attention.
Sure. And Mr. Williams, a comment. If the facts are as egregious as you're saying, you probably would prevail in getting a civil injunction, which is a route you could go as well. It sounds like a really pretty intolerable situation for you. So,
Yeah, it's frustrating.
Yeah.
Thanks for that free legal advice.
It's
worth what you pay for it.
Nothing is free. I mean, it'll cost you, but a really egregious violation like that, the equities may weigh in your favor. So,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So bringing it back to the council.
I just wanted to ask, actually, in bringing it all the way around here, is I would love to see, and I realize we're not taking any kind of action tonight, it's an initial discussion, but to see some of the other cities that may be sort of like ours geographically, and how we're situated with our valleys and our canyons, and look at their ordinances and see what, I'm sure you have.
Actually, I'll tell you where you can see that. So at the Air District, on their website, there's a table that's up there for every town, every county that has an ordinance, and there's links to their ordinances.
So I guess my question is, where do we need to go from here? And you were saying that ours is pretty good, but
I think for a town like Fairfax, ours is pretty good, given that we have one code enforcement person. And I think also the fact that the Air District is in the process of revising their rule. So the rule may change somewhat. It may be a little premature, but if we want to learn more about wood smoke and more about these ordinances, I can see if one of the staff can come here and do more on it, or we can just try to set something up separately for a couple of you if you're interested. And I can I mean, the difficulty is with Brown Act stuff. Can't really do this, but their website, I made them do that. So it was me and my staff did it, was we had a list of every ordinance that has ever been adopted, what the provisions are, and then a link to the ordinances.
So what do we need to do here with this?
My feeling is, I think at this point is we really just wanted to discuss the item, and it was really in response to Mr. Williams reaching out to me. And I think at this point, my suggestion would be we leave it for now and consider maybe in 6 months or so looking at it more seriously when the Air District has more about what their rule is going to be. Mr. Williams, did you want to add something briefly?
Sure. So I guess what I'm hearing from you is that you don't feel like the wood smoke nuisance ordinance like the City of Berkeley has, City of Davis has, the public Puget Sound Clean Energy up in my home state of Washington has. You don't feel like that would be a valid addition to the ordinance for Fairfax?
My personal opinion is if we were going to add anything, that's the one that I would have suggested. But I think it may be premature to do that. And I don't really think for your specific situation it gets you in a much better place, because what it does is if you added that, the first thing is you deliver a letter to your neighbor. You try to conversationally work it out. If it doesn't work out, you go to mediation, and that's on your dime. And then if it doesn't work out, you can continue stepwising up until you end up in a civil action, which is what for a private nuisance cause of action. So I think, I'm not really sure that it gets you where you need to be to fix the problem at this point. But I will open up to my colleagues on the council and see what their thoughts are. Anyone else?
Well, I would think just having that as an ordinance, and so if you were to raise that to a neighbor and say, look, at the Fairfax Town Council actually supports citizens who are having this unwanted advance of wood smoke, they support this process, would actually perhaps influence that neighbor to cut down on their behavior of burning the wood smoke, rather than it's just a single neighbor coming and saying, I'm going to take a civil action against you, to actually have the backing of the town in that process.
Okay, so what, members of the council, what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, if I may, sometimes these pre-mediation, kind of escalated, do this step first, do that step first. In a way, it hinders someone like you. It's like, oh my God, stop burning your smoke, and then you have to go through this long, drawn-out process before you can, bring a civil action. It's, I don't know that it's of that much value. I suppose it has some sort of moral force to point to the ordinance, but if someone doesn't care one way or the other, in a way, it could be kind of an encumbrance, that aspect of it. And by the time we enact something like that, it's not going to be anytime soon. So it may not be the best tool for your particular dispute if your neighbor's not willing to participate either.
David wanted to add something.
Not so much add something as to wonder if the town attorney would like to share some thoughts on this section.
We spoke briefly, and I think it sounds like the council is thinking that perhaps we just need to wait till the Bay Area Air Quality District takes a look at some things. At that same time, next time when we talk about something like this, if it's 6 months or whatever down the road, I'm sure the town attorney can weigh in on our concerns related to that one provision, as well as staff can obviously weigh in more on different costs for some of the different categories. But I think I would recommend that you don't do anything at this time. We'll take a look at, in essence, a code enforcement action to see if there is a code enforcement action of the issues, and that the council, when we report back in April, at that time, if you tell us, well, rather than waiting, we'd like to take a closer look, then we can do that with the ordinance.
I think that's a good approach. And also, I know the Bay Area is starting workshops, and they're going to have a workshop in Marin sometime in mid-April on their rule, but that's not a finalized rule. It's just concepts they're throwing out. So I think that would be a good approach. Let's see where we are back in April, and we could take this up again then.
Perhaps we could trade in our bike locker for an EPA-certified wood-burning stove for your neighbor.
I second that.
Thank you, Mr. Williams.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you. So we'll hear back on this item in April, really dealing with 34 Roca. And I think the way we should agendize this, Garrett, is the possibility of discussing the ordinance again, although I think it will still be premature in April, but let's report back on where we are in 34 Roca. Thank you. So with that, we'll close that out. And it is, even though our clock says it's only a little after 7, it's actually after 10. So we've got 3 more items that I don't think will take very long. I'm hoping the council was willing to sit through and finish them up.
4.
Okay.
Well, 3 won't take too long.
Oh, 4. Oh, that's right. I forgot about the mid-year budget review. Thank you, David. So I think we can just power on. Thank you. So let's move on to item 10. Thank you, Mr. Williams, for staying so long.
So item 10, that's your annual mid-year budget report. And before I turn it over to our finance director, just want to point out we did provide the resolution to you in a supplemental materials that you should have. And then some general comments. It really looks like in terms of our revenue projections, we're probably going to be right on budget. So roughly what we budgeted, we think we're actually going to collect. On the expenditure side, it looks like through departmental savings, we might experience as high as $230,000. We are recommending in this report that we reallocate about $130,000 of that towards some capital improvement projects. And the bottom line overall is that while in the report it talks about maybe we'll add $120,000 to fund balance, I think we perhaps need to back off that number. We do think we'll probably add $50,000 to $100,000 to the fund balance by the end of the year. It's just hard at this point, just because there might be some other expenditures we just weren't thinking of that may come in. But what's important to note is that in the adopted budget for this fiscal year, we actually thought we would tap in the fund balance, and it looks like we are not going to tap in the fund balance. So in essence, you did like you did last year, where you actually added to fund balance, so you have that added savings not tapping into it. So that's a good thing. But at this point, I think I'll turn it over to our finance director to walk you through the report.
So I'm not going to go strictly by the report. Rather, I would like to just kind of, give perspective to it and flesh it out a little bit. To remind you, our budget is about $7 million for the general fund of revenues, with another $3 million in other funds, for a total of $10 million of anticipated revenues, and about the same amounts for the expenditures. So we're talking in terms of the effect on a budget of $7 million or $10 million, depending whether we're talking just general fund or total revenues. So the report that we've got here is basically looking at 7 months of activity and projecting through to June 30. We looked at the revenues and tried to project based on the historical receipts that have been received in prior years for the final 5 months, and also based on updated projections from our analysts. We met with our sales tax rep this morning, and so some of the things that we learned through her are not actually in the report, but I'll try to touch on those when I talk about these. For the expenses, we looked at historical spending patterns, also talked to each of the departments to find out what kind of expenses that they anticipated on a realistic basis through June 30. And where there were significant differences, then I went in and looked to see why there was differences and what the likely effect was going to be. For revenues, we are coming in just slightly less than what we budgeted, just slightly less. The property taxes are up by about $114,000. That's about 3.5% over what we had budgeted. So, it started off really good here, saying the property taxes was up by 114, but conversely, the sales taxes are down. When I talked with a sales rep this morning, she was saying that, the last quarter, or a year ago quarter, and the quarter that she was talking about, which was the third quarter, January through, September through December, was up by about 9%. And I said, this doesn't make sense to me, why the sales tax would show that it's up when I'm showing a projection that it's going to be down. Well, when we really dived into it, we found out some things. One is that we double counted revenue for the triple flip. Her numbers that she gives us for sales tax includes the triple flip, and then we budgeted it also. So that's actually probably the biggest portion of why sales taxes are down, is because we double counted a revenue source that was reflected in the report. But more importantly, in projecting forward, her numbers are based on quarters that don't reflect two significant things that have happened to us this year. One is that gasoline prices took a huge dip, and if gas is selling for half price, the sales tax collected on it is half price. So for the period of time that we're seeing this dip, we're collecting less sales tax, significantly less sales tax from our gas stations during that period. The second significant event is that there's several restaurants that I've seen close their doors, and we're not going to be receiving revenues from, as an example, Deer Park, off of their retail activity that they had. They were one of our top 10 sales tax producers. So we're going to see down the way less sales tax because of those kinds of events. Our building revenues are coming in a little bit less than what we thought they were going to be. We had budgeted $450,000. Our best projection is that we'll probably see $40,000 less than that. So it's down by almost 8% from what we had originally projected. On the good side, our highway user tax is about 4.6% ahead of the same time period last year, and I'm projecting that we might see an additional $30,000 if that kind of trend holds through the end of the year. So we might see that we have actually more highway tax than we expected. We're going to check and see whether that can be used for bike lockers in any manner or form, if that helps out to solve a problem here. And basically, to summarize for revenues, the revenues for the general fund, we showed in the report that we thought that was going to be above what we had budgeted by about $18,000 because of the adjustments that we have to do to the sales tax for that double counting of triple flip money. I'm anticipating that we'll probably see a decrease of about $40,000, which is only about 0.5%. And I was telling the auditor when I came in, I said, when you're coming in with a budget report that basically says you met budget, it's somewhat disappointing to me. I like to be able to have really good news, but she says, Mike, being on budget is really good news. So I hope you see it that way rather than me being able to come to you and say we have lots of extra money to be able to spend. Our department expenditures are going to come in, I'm projecting, below budget. At December 31st, the general fund expenditures, we had spent about $373,000, $3,733,000, or about 46% of what we had budgeted, and that's against a benchmark of about 50%. So, only about 5 departments had exceeded 50% of their budget, but not by very much. I mean, if you look at the report, you see that one department had 50.2% over budget, but I'm honor bound to include them as having exceeded budget at this point. Our personnel costs are about 49% expended, so we're right on track as far as what we had anticipated to be spent for personnel costs. In addition, our PERS costs are less than what we expected, less than what we budgeted, in part, a large part due to the turnover that's happened in the police department among first tier people being traded out for third tier employees. So they're going to see some cost savings as a result of that. Our healthcare costs this last year went up by about 7.7%. But we anticipated that when we went in and did the budget. So I don't think that there's going to be any adjustment that's necessary based on the healthcare increases that we saw in January. So Garrett mentioned that we passed a resolution around that has various budget adjustments in it. I don't know whether you want to go over those budget ones yourself, Garrett, or do you want me to touch on the highlights of the kinds of things that were included in it?
Go ahead.
So we have budget adjustment that we want to make to personnel costs in specific department based on covering contract adjustments that happened during the year after we did the budget. The police department has indicated that they'd like to use some of their cost savings from their department to purchase additional equipment of about $57,000, including body cameras and other equipment that is detailed there. We have an appropriation that we need to make for the storm damage that was up on Manzanita Road. That's going to cost, we expect, in the neighborhood of what, $160,000? But a large part of it is going to be funded by reallocating Measure A money within the fund, so that the bottom line effect is that we'll need to transfer over about $64,000 from the general fund in order to close the gap on that particular repair. We do need to do roof repairs up at the pavilion, but we've decided that we can use funds within the account or within the project for refitting the pavilion and come back to you later to backfill those funds that are going to be necessary for retrofit. So I don't think we'll be asking for an adjustment on that, but I wanted to mention it as something that we're going to be doing as an internal adjustment within the fund. There are several other adjustments, but we figured that they could be absorbed within existing budgets. So with that, I'd like to open it up to any questions that you might have.
Questions?
A question, yeah, Mike. In talking about the Manzanita Road project, on page 4 it says that you'd need to transfer about $64,000 from Fund 53, but that you anticipate the Public Works savings should be able to absorb those costs. And just so I understand what you're saying, then are you saying that the Public Works Department, you're anticipating that it's going to be enough under budget that would cover the costs of the town's contribution to fix Manzanita Road?
That's correct. The departmental savings could be used to fund that aspect of the project. And actually, I don't think it's going to cost that much, but we just put that in with contingencies just to make sure that's the case. And it just reminds me, I think Mayor Kohler, you had mentioned earlier on this item about seeking reimbursement under FEMA. And so we will do that. I don't know if we'll receive anything, but I mean, that's a possibility. And if we do receive something, it'll probably take a while to get the money. But this will help us fund it up front. And if we get reimbursed later, then that would just go to replace some of this funding. And depending on the number, it might just go back into the general fund.
Okay, and then related to that, on page 5, it talks about the $60,000 transfer, and it says that $15,000 will come from park maintenance, street maintenance, $25,000 from street maintenance, and so forth. Is it anticipated that, for example, the park maintenance funds will somehow be reimbursed from other savings in the Public Works Department? I'm just trying to understand the thinking.
The numbers?
Okay. How these things are going to balance out.
So the numbers are, we basically took those numbers from, in each department we have something set aside for contractual services or outside consulting, depending on what that is. And we've determined that we can probably, perhaps not, I'll use an example. Perhaps we're not going to have time to patch X, Y, and Z road And so we think we'll have a little surplus there. And generally when we budget, though, more importantly, we usually build in a surplus because there's always something every year that pops up that we have to handle, and that gives us the flexibility to do that. And this time, that flexibility is really allocated to this project as opposed to other projects.
Okay, thanks.
Can I just, it's a little piggyback on Peter's comments. So when a situation comes up and we have to deal with Manzanita and we use those funds that were otherwise allocated to repave Tamalpais, and then in the staff report it says we put it on hold. What happens? Where does that money then come from to continue? It says after the PG&E pipe project is finished. So if someone on Tamalpais said, I thought we were getting our road paved, what would be your answer to them?
The answer would be what we would do is we'd reallocate the next cycle for TAM funding. We would suggest to the council perhaps we put that funding toward that project. The other scenario is as we receive reimbursements or receive other grant monies or reimburses and replenishes funds, then we'd have an option for the council to consider some other funding sources to do work. But in essence, at this point, I don't think PG&E necessarily has a time frame for doing that work. And it's pretty extensive, so I'm not too sure what year. I don't know if it's going to fall in next fiscal year. I guess that's my answer.
I have a couple of questions. One is, I noticed we want to buy a police vehicle, which I guess is for, it wasn't a regular police vehicle, it was something else. Undercover work. So I imagine we're getting Camaro or something. Just kidding. But I thought we usually, there you go. I thought we were in the business of leasing vehicles rather than purchasing them. I'm wondering why we're not doing that.
I've sort of been an advocate of not doing the leasing. You pay an extra amount to finance these things over 4 years. If you have the resources up front, unless you're talking about a big amount of leasing, I'm sort of an advocate of saying buy the vehicle.
Okay.
And not going through the leasing means. And other people may suggest something, and I'm open to other things. But administratively, it's a big hassle to track the leases. It does cost us money to finance these things, and I'd like to steer away from trying to pay these kind of finance charges for those sorts of things unless you really, really need to do it.
Okay, well, that's fine. And then, I know getting reimbursement from FEMA is always quite difficult, but the governor did declare an emergency. And I guess one thing that would give me some comfort, maybe it's just me, is having something that will seek reimbursement from FEMA for the Manzanita Road project. I mean, I feel that it doesn't mean that we're going to get it, but I just feel that this is a really legitimate thing to try to get funding for. Well, I was just thinking, on this page where we have number 3, appropriate $160,000 and Fund 53 for storm damage repair.
Just add a note.
Just have a note
Sure.
that we would seek FEMA reimbursement for this emergency, just because that makes a heck of a lot of sense. It doesn't mean that we'll get it.
Yeah, I mean, they declared the emergency that next day.
Right, so we're in good shape there as far as the possibility of getting it. And then just one question. Mike, do we have a feeling why the $40,000 hit in the fees? You had kind of an explanation for the sales tax that I thought was pretty helpful.
One of the things that I noted when I went through it was we've been doing a lot of cleanup in the fees area, and so one of the reasons why it's down is because there was a lot of reimbursements done of deposits that we had on the books, and so that that was a significant item that we noted as to why the revenues were down. But it still does mean that we'll have less revenue as a result of refunding people monies that were deposits.
No, I think that's a good reason, and I also want to thank you for always making sure that, you know, we're doing these kinds of things, that we're not just, you know, figuring out at the end of the year, you know, that you are doing these fund shifts. So thank you for your diligence and really keeping on top of the budget. I think our auditor sort of mentioned that, but, you know, just getting that audit done so quickly was amazing. So thank you for that. Other comments, or do we want to go for a motion here?
One. Yeah, first of all, Mike, I mean, obviously you weren't here back in the days when I think the accounting was done on the back of almost discarded envelopes. So to see your work here is almost, it's hard to say thank you in the appropriate way compared. But one thing I would like, not necessarily today, but if somebody could report back where we are on making sure that the Airbnb folks are paying up on the TOT. Thank you.
Okay, so with that, thank you, David.
Public comment.
Oh, I'm sorry. Frank, did you want to make a public comment? You don't have to. I almost forgot about you out there.
I'm used to going to a mosquito district meeting and there's no one in the audience. But if I wasn't here, you'd be sitting there all by yourself. And no one would
So you're basically keeping us company?
So I'm keeping you company.
Okay, good.
But on the issue of
Do you want to speak in the microphone?
On the issue of FEMA since Marin was declared a disaster area, have you been maintaining your monthly emergency declaration and going through the process to try to get some money out of them, some reimbursement?
I think Garrett and Mike have done an incredible job of keeping track of that, and actually the governor declared an emergency, so we're in good shape there. And Garrett did the paperwork immediately for Marin County, so Marin did declare an emergency first.
Sure. I mean, you've really got to stay on them. I mean, there were years when we had a lot of damage, you know, in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, and they kind of stiffed us too.
I think Garrett did it that day to get it to Marin County, so these guys are really on top of that. Thank you for adding that.
Well, I noticed the sales tax was down, and did I hear correctly? Because with Deer Park Villa being closed, it's impacting the sales tax?
I'm looking at the situation and saying that has to affect it. I mean, to not be open every day and the bar is closed, the restaurant's closed. What they basically have now is special events, and you know the services aren't going to generate sales tax. The food will, but you know that's significantly lower than what it was as a full-service restaurant. But the sales tax is mostly down because we double counted a revenue within the sales tax. The projection that our consultant gives us includes, we find out today, that the triple flip line that we have in our budget. So I budgeted that there, but it was also included in our basic sales tax projection. So we just found that out today. So that's probably the biggest reason why we're saying sales tax is going to be less than what we projected, is because we projected probably too high.
Okay, thank you, Frank. All right, with that, I'll bring it back to the council. Thank you for reminding me. I'd like to entertain a motion. Someone want to make a motion? David, you look like you're ready for one.
Yes, I will make a motion to adopt resolution accepting the 14-15 mid-year budget review with the mid-year budget adjustment.
With the tiny friendly amendment I made?
Sure.
Okay, second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
I'd like to say thank you to the council. I had more people come to me than I've ever seen before to sit down and talk numbers, and it really does me a warm feeling to see people talking numbers.
Well, I really appreciate your taking the time to explain the numbers to me. It's been very helpful for me personally. Thank you.
All right, so thank you, Mike. I guess you get to go home. Let's move on to item number 12, and I think we're almost done. Garrett, would you like to do the staff report, please?
Sure. This is a follow-up from your February 4th meeting where you made council assignments to the different boards, committees, and JPAs. What we found, there's kind of 3 additional assignments and appointments for the council to consider. At the last meeting, we talked about the Miro appointment, and then there's a resolution attached. And for Miro right now, the police chief is your primary, and then you could have 2 alternates. Right now, your second alternate's a sergeant, and the first alternate used to be a council member. You just need to decide if you want a council member be the first or second alternate, or you want me to do it, or just however you want to handle that. The next assignment is a clarification the Vice Mayor Goddard suggested is Ross Valley Schools Healthy Communities Collaborative. She's a representative to the school board, and she's indicated she'd like to be the council's official representative to the RVSHCC, because she has been attending the meetings. And lastly, Measure A committee. Last year, the council appointed a committee for Measure A, which has to do with the park funding. At that time, you appointed council members Kohler and Councilmember Bragman. Obviously, Councilmember Bragman is no longer on the council, so you would either need to fill that vacancy, or you can appoint 2 different people or whatever. But the work plan, typically, we would convene that committee sometime in April or May to talk about the next allocation of Measure A park funding.
Mayor, can I ask, I'd indulge on 2 points. One is on the mirror thing. I do think that it should stay with the chief and other governmental functionaries. But if that were not the case, with the pleasure, since I am tracking this as the alternate to the fire board, just for purposes of, it would just seem economic management, that I'd be more than happy to take that on. And the other is I would like to throw my name in to be considered for the Measure A committee.
Okay, so let me make this clear. On the Mira, you wanted to be the second alternate or the first alternate?
No, I think that the way that Garrett has laid it out is the better way to go. It should be, the chief and then a sergeant. But if the chief and the sergeant were not able to attend for some important reason, since I'm tracking this stuff as the alternate for the fire board, it would just make, management sense to appoint me as the second alternate, if you will. I don't even know that we have to track it, but I'm just available for that. It would seem nonsensical to have another council member spending time on this.
All right, well, we'll put your name down for the second alternate as a possibility, and then we'll have further discussion, and then...
I raised Measure A not only as my particular interest in it, but I think if you flip the page and look at other people's opportunities, I think my load sharing is a bit light, much lighter than I would like it to be. So beyond a substantive interest, I also want to make sure that I'm carrying my weight on the council.
Okay, one thing I'm noticing is I am on the Measure A committee, and I don't see my name on that on the flip side.
That's because it was not part of the town council assignments list as of February 4th, and then when you brought it to my attention, so the next one,
all right.
you'll be
That's
on
just
it.
why it's not on
But
there.
I knew
all
you
right.
were.
Okay, and then other people want to speak up. John, did you want to speak up?
Yeah, just, Peter's also light. He's new, so, I don't want to load up the new guy. It takes a while to come up to speed on all these things, but, there's a lot of different things to do, and obviously you have to have an interest. I just throw that out there. Measure A, I know that I always like to lobby whoever's on there for, our Fairfax trails. So
Okay.
You know, that's what I would lobby for if I was on there.
Okay. All right. So right now, I think you're bringing up Peter as an option for certain things.
Yeah, if you're interested in Mira, I don't know. But
Mira is I think there's value in having the police sergeant be the second alternate.
No, the police sergeant is the first alternate. The second alternate would be a council member potentially.
Yeah, and I don't have a burning desire for Mira. I mean, David, if you want to take that on.
Yeah, I didn't mean to stir the pot.
And but I was going to offer too, as far as taking on some other committees as well. But
do you want to go for Measure I, the Oversight Committee? That would really drive you into the recent tax measure.
Measure J.
It's the Measure J.
Or Measure J.
And that would really drive it into an understanding of where the money comes from and where the money's going.
Yeah, I could take that on.
I'll be happy to. So why don't I give that to you, and if it's the council's pleasure, I would take A as the alternate.
Okay.
Alternative. I think it would bring the intellectual vigor to that committee that it really needs.
Okay, so Measure A is not an alternate. There's 2 council members on there, and I would like to stay on there. And I think Renee's idea of the Healthy Communities Collaborative as a formal assignment sounds good, and it sounds like it's taking a lot of time as well.
And then additionally, in terms of talking about assignments and so forth, I'd spoken to Frank Egger, and he had expressed an interest in still continuing to serve as the alternate to the Ross Valley Paramedic Authority. I'm happy to serve in that capacity too, but I also wanted to just offer that might be a valuable kind of historical continuity to keep Frank's involvement, given his many years of service.
Let me suggest why we've thought, or I've thought differently, with all respect, is that this is a tax, a tax that's placed on the people. And in my own opinion, where a tax or fee is involved, the representative at the meeting should be an elected official. It's about that simple.
Okay, I appreciate that thought.
I think that Frank represents us on the Vector Control District and does an admirable job, and that is a parcel tax or 2. So I'm not really sure. I think that one of the things I thought about subsequent to the last meeting was the 33 or 34 years with the institutional knowledge, and it is an alternate. I do feel that it would be better to leave that with Frank because he brings so much institutional memory. There's so few things that we have on that. And I think where Frank was an alternate, he would come back here and discuss things that he voted for or suggested. So I think one of the things that I want to just caution is that the way this is written, we're really not up to divvying up a lot of assignments. It's talking about these 3. Can we do things like switch Measure I Oversight Committee as well?
It's generic enough. It's just discuss,
Okay,
consider,
well,
and we just gave you specifics that we knew of.
I'm fine with that. So if we said we had, so it sounds like Peter, I guess, let's take a vote on these things. Right now we have David would be the second alternate to Mira, with the chief and the police sergeant being first, second. I mean, primary and then first alternate, and then David would be second alternate. Renee, I don't think anybody's going to fight her for that new one. And then...
And no alternate?
I don't think so.
It's okay.
And then Measure A committee, I would like to nominate myself and David. And then what's also being discussed, and I think we should take a vote on this, is having Frank go back and be our Ross Valley Paramedic Authority alternate, and then also having Peter take over the Measure I, soon to be J, Oversight Committee. So can we have a motion? Oh, I'm sorry, public comment. Thank you. I'm forgetting myself. Is there public comment on this matter for our one person in the audience? Frank?
Well, as I've always said, I've always served at the pleasure of the council, so that that's I would appreciate that. But I think I can help John get up to speed quickly too on as the regular representative, and between the two of us, we can really look out for Fairfax's interests.
Okay, well, I think what Peter was suggesting, he's the alternate to Ross Valley Paramedic Authority, and give that up to you to be the alternate. Is that something you're interested in, or do you think we can stay where we are, and then you can work with John to get him up to speed and be a resource for him? How do you feel about this?
Well, as the alternate, if I remained in that position, I think it'd be advantageous to the town.
Okay.
When I'm at the meetings, they're talking about maybe moving some of the ambulances, and it might be an opportunity for Ross Valley Fire Authority to take on a little more.
David, no side comments at this point. Okay. Well, thank you.
So what I'm saying, yes, I would be.
Okay,
be
you'd
pleased
be
to
interested
stay. Yes.
if we decide to go that way. So let's first take a motion on. Let's do this piecemeal. A motion for David as the second alternate for Mira. Who wants to make that motion?
I'll make that motion.
Okay, second.
Second.
John. Okay, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, so
Madam Mayor,
yeah.
If you can make another motion to adopt a resolution for the Mira appointment.
Okay, and then I'd like to have a motion for the Mira appointment, and actually the resolution isn't written correctly because the way I understand it, Chief Moran is the primary, the police sergeant is designated as the second alternate. David, did you want to be the first alternate, or no? So, well, so what we want to do is change the resolution to have.
It has him as the second alternate.
It says first alternate blank.
No, it says in the absence of the designated representative and first alternate.
Oh, thank you. All right.
Sure.
Thank you, Peter. I'm losing it. All right, so we have David Weinsoff. Okay, so who would like to make a motion to accept the resolution? Approve the resolution?
I'll make the motion.
Okay, who wants a second? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so Mira is done. Let's do Ross Valley Healthy Communities Collaborative and Measure A Committee together. And that would be Renee for RV, whatever it is.
Actually, the acronym is not correct. It's RVHCC, no S.
Okay, well, there's
Just
Ross Valley.
for the record.
Healthy Communities
Healthy
Club.
Community Collaborative.
Okay, so Renee for that one. David and Barbara for Measure A Committee. Do we want a motion on that?
So moved.
Second? Who wants a second?
I'll second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye. So is those two primaries or is one an alternate on the
No,
Measure
they're
A?
just primaries.
They're both
There's
primaries.
just
Okay.
2 council members.
All right.
Okay, then Measure I Oversight Committee, having Peter on that instead of David. Who wants to make a motion for that?
I'll move that.
Second? David? And all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, so in the last one would be Frank would be the alternate. It's proposed. Frank Egger is proposed as the Ross Valley Paramedic Authority alternate rather than Peter Lax. And who would like to make a motion on that?
Can I ask a question before we do it?
Yes.
I'm just curious, so if Frank were to attend a meeting, then would there be some requirement that he would then come back to report to council of that meeting? Because otherwise we wouldn't have an official liaison, meaning that John, we know, comes every month, and then we hear.
Yeah, I think that would be appropriate.
Just so that we're in.
Why don't we let Frank answer that?
Sure. I would report to the council on the meetings that I attended, and I think when Larry was unable to make a meeting, it might have been two meetings during the year. There's not a lot of meetings where Larry wasn't able to make it. He had some conflicts with Marine Clean Energy, and sometimes he had Barbara cover for him at Marine Clean Energy.
Yeah, he had other conflicts with Marine Clean Energy too, but that was one of the ones because it was at the same time. But the good news is that meeting is now moving too. So, okay, that they're moving that date of that meeting as well. So, okay, so the motion would be to have Frank serve as the alternate for the Ross Valley Paramedic Authority, and he would come back and report to the council for any of those few meetings he attended. So does anyone want to make a motion for that? Peter, did you want to make it?
Sure, I'll make that motion.
Does anyone want a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any
Aye.
noes? Okay, no. So I think you got that. So Frank will be our alternate on the Ross Valley Paramedic Authority. Thank you, Frank. Thank you all.
Just a quick question. When does Measure I/Measure J meet? Okay, thank you. No wonder you wanted to switch.
It's right after this meeting.
Actually, that's a very good question, Peter, which you need to have answered. Both Measure K oversight and Measure I oversight, or J oversight, what is the structure for how they meet and how they function, actually?
It's as needed, but typically what we'll do for Measure J is part of the budget approval process. We'll schedule a meeting prior to then so you could see, so the committee could talk about how the funds are being allocated or take a look at how the funds are being allocated. So I would say sometime in May.
And when's the last time Measure K Oversight Committee met?
Measure K would only meet if there's really an ability to allocate funding. So it hasn't met in a few years since there's no funding to allocate. Right now it's just repaying all the bonds. Well, you're supposed to have a committee, but there's not a reason for it to meet at this time. If you're ever to refinance, which I don't know if you could ever, then
Well, that's why we met the last series of meetings, is because we did refinance it and we pulled some more money out. And,
okay.
You know, I was just talking with our...
Let's move on. We've got two more items to go. Number 13, the second reading by title only and adoption of Ordinance 785, an ordinance of the Town Council of the Town of Fairfax amending Chapter 17.064 signs of the Town Code. Garrett, did you want to do the staff report, or do we just go forward?
Yeah, it's just the second reading of the sign ordinance, and it'll take, if you approve the second reading, then what will happen, it'll take effect 30 days from now.
Okay. So anyone on the council have any comments?
I just saw one word addition which might grammatically be helpful. On the light pollution, it's the second page, the very first red line. Oh, we should make any changes. Okay, it's not important.
Okay, because we need two reads of the exact same ordinance.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's never mind then. It doesn't make any difference, so I can let it go in the interest of expediting this.
Well, with that, thank you, Peter. I will open up to public comment if there is any. Seeing none, okay, let's bring it back to the council. Does someone want to make a motion?
Go ahead, John.
Oh, okay. I'll make a motion to waive second reading and read by title only ordinance number 785, an ordinance by us amending chapter 17.064 signs of the Fairfax Town Code.
Second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Okay, moving on to number 14. the second reading by title only and adoption of ordinance number 787, an ordinance of the Town Council of the Town of Fairfax amending Chapter 17.040 General Zone Regulations, adding Section 17.092.130, 17.096.140, 17.100.130, 17.104.120, 17.108.080, and 17.112030, and deleting Article 11 of Chapter 17.100 CC Central Commercial Zone of the Fairfax Town Code relating to formula businesses and restaurants. Garrett, did you want to do a quick staff report?
Sure. As a follow-up, you recall your last meeting, you introduced the reading with some minor amendments. We have a red line showing that, and we're recommending if you adopt the second reading this evening, then it would take effect 30 days from now. And at that point, then the moratorium would expire.
And anyone on the council have any comments? Remember, this is the second reading, so if there are comments, they should be substantive. Good. Okay, seeing none, any public comment? Seeing none, bringing it back to the council. Would someone like to make a motion?
I will make a motion to waive the second reading and read by title only, adopting the ordinance number 787, an ordinance of the Town Council of the Town of Fairfax, amending Chapter 17.040 General Zone Regulations, adding Section 17.092.130, 17.096.140, 17.100.130, 17.104.120, 17.108.080, and 17.112.030, and deleting Article 11 of Chapter 17.100, the CC Central Commercial Zone of the Fairfax Town Code relating to formula businesses and restaurants.
Second. And all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. We're adjourned. Thank you, everyone.